think for Americans, it's hard to grasp the fact that your country is in threat of not existing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That the place that you were born to, the place that you are connected, like that where your ancestors have been buried for thousands of years, that all of a sudden you don't have access to that anymore. All of a sudden you are not allowed to go there anymore. That is not yours anymore.
1, 2, 3, breathe. This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney and Jenkins. Hello, welcome to the 4th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. And on this episode, I have with me sisters, Inga and Sona Stamboltsyan, and we're talking about the authentic Armenian voice. I met Inga a few years ago through a mutual friend of ours, and she is Armenian. And through the blossoming of our friendship, I've not only learned a lot about Inga, but because she is Armenian, I've learned a lot about the Armenian culture. And to be honest, I knew very little about the Armenian culture before knowing her. And she's introduced me and opened doors for me and opened my eyes to things in so many ways. I went to see her in a play where she played Frida Kahlo, and it was performed in the Armenian language, which blew my mind. I never experienced anything like that before. And she also introduced me to Vahik Paramze, an Armenian actor, a director, a comedian, a writer who is very well known in the Armenian community. And he put me in his film Tenny, which is a film based on the Armenian-American experience. And that was a really unique experience for me, being on set, especially being one of the few, if not only, cast members who spoke no Armenian at all. And just being on set, I was able to be surrounded by these people who hold such a reverence for their culture. And through that experience, I met Sona, who is Inga's sister, and she was the AD, the assistant director on the film, and also the line producer. And she has such a deep love for Armenia. Like, it comes out of her pores in everything that she does. And not only that, but she's amazing at her job. I don't know how that film would have gotten completed without her. So Tenny went on to have a theatrical release in Los Angeles for about 3 weeks, and now it's available on Amazon Prime. But that's not the reason why I have them on this podcast. There's a lot going on in Armenia right now. It's been happening for several months, and there's a war going on, and the news is not accurately reporting what is actually happening in Armenia. And so after talking to Inga and Sona about what's going on, I really wanted to give them a platform to express what is happening to their culture, to their roots, to their family, to their ancestral line, when things are not being reported as they are really happening. It's really important to amplify their voices right now. It's so important to give them a place where they can share their experience of being Armenian, and not only just Armenian, but Armenian-American, and not feeling that their voices are being heard. So this conversation is a little long, but I think every single moment is super important and valid, and I wanted to give them the proper time to express everything that they needed to express. There's a lot of information in this episode. There's a lot of history, which Sona is so knowledgeable and has such wisdom about. There's the analysis of what is currently happening there, and there is a lot of discussion about the emotional processing of what it's like to have your entire culture and the history of your existence threatened and being wiped out. So I hope that you take some time to listen to this and give some thought and take some action if you feel so inspired. The news and the media is not giving this the appropriate recognition that it deserves. So here is Sona and Inga Stamboltsyan.
My parents thought that I was going to be like an ice skater, so they took me to ice skating classes. After the first introductory ice skating class, I was like, everybody's all racing around, and I'm by myself going like, tuck, tuck, trying to stay, vertical. And then they were after like 6 months, they were like, oh, she can't skate. All she can do is maybe rollerblade without falling down. That's fine. That's all we need. That was the end of it.
That was it. So my dad, perhaps after that experience, I was like, hey, Dad, I want to go to gymnastics. Oh no, you're 6 years old. It's way too late for you. You're supposed to start at 3.
I wanted to take gymnastics, and my mom wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
Because she said, my mom wouldn't let me take gymnastics because she said that when I got older, I would get fat because I wasn't going to be using the same muscles.
Oh, that's interesting, because my dad told me that I couldn't go to karate, and that if I wanted to, maybe I can go to gymnastics, because if I went to karate, then I would start looking like a boy. Who wants boy muscles? I was like, there's such thing as boy muscles and girl muscles?
Interesting.
Yeah. But anytime my dad didn't want us to send us to something, we were like, hey, Dad, can I go, I don't know, like, can I take like ballroom dancing? Oh, yeah, no, it's too late for you. You can't be a Olympic sports medalist. You're 9. People start at 2. You didn't start at 2. So, no, sorry, you can't. It's too late for you. I'm like, but this, I'm 9. That's too late. You can't be a gold medalist. So why try? Why do it anyway? It's just a waste of time.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember like watching ballroom dancing, and I was in high school, and I was still doing like dancing and stuff. And I was like, oh, I want to go, and I would love to do that. And my dad was like, you're too old. You're way too old. You're 15.
You're 15.
You're 15. Your muscles have developed already. You are done. You are geriatric. You are a geriatric dancer. The most that you can accomplish is just, you know what I mean, like a regional thing at your community college. Like that's it.
Like, wow. At the next wedding, you show your dancing at the wedding.
So
and the weird thing is that like at 16, 17, I was in the dance program at high school, and I went and I danced professionally with like a professional dance troupe. It was like the Klezmers, and they did a thing where they took high school students to dance with them. And I went in and I danced with them, and I was asking them, so when did you guys started dancing? I'm expecting they're like, oh, I started when I was 5. And they're like, oh, no, we started when we were about your age in high school. I was like, oh, there's still hope. I got all excited, went home, and my dad was like, nope, they're lying to you, darling.
No, they started at
You should have started when you were 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, why didn't I start when I was 3?
I love it. My dad's excuse was always, you should have started when you were 3. I wasn't making decisions when I was 3, by the way, Father. Nicely way of saying, no, honey, you don't have any talent, and we don't want to put any money into something. That was his kindest way that he could say, look what happened when we put you in piano.
She went for like maybe 4 classes and barely learned where the fingers were. And it's kind of like, no, her fingers are too small. She's not advanced yet.
Yeah, it was funny.
So how did he become accepting of you doing theater and film? Were you too old for that?
I just forced him to.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm doing it.
Yeah. No, I think same thing with me.
No, my dad also had when he was younger, our age, he had film equipment in Armenia in Soviet times, which is very rare. Because me and Inga, we have baby pictures because our dad had a camera, and he had a lab that he would develop the pictures at. A lot of people from our generation don't have any of that because they didn't have parents that could afford to. A lot of pictures were only taken at the studio, and you took it, when you got married, when the baby was just born, and like once a year you would go take a formal photo. So he had that. He also had like a Super 8 camera, which I inherited, and all the lenses, and I still have it actually. So when he saw me going into that field, and it was kind of like, I'm doing this. This is it. This is what I choose. And then that's when he was kind of like, oh, okay, you did inherit some artistic things from me. So go on, I'll allow it.
Yeah, following in.
And it doesn't hurt that, huh?
I said, to be fair, you did go to art for a million years, that was your thing. That was the thing that you would share with him too. That was where your talents were, both of your talents. Now, I mean, I didn't. They were like, yeah, Inga, I mean, we'll babysit her, but she's not going to turn an artist. She's not going to become an artist. So stop bringing her, or she's not going to advance. So I stopped going. They tried.
Inga, they want. It's not because you didn't have talent. It's because it was double the price for you to go.
But I think, that's why Dad was okay, because you were taking an interest in one of his interests, and which was film. So I think that was it.
And I started more from the photography aspect of it, because I did journalism for a while, and I was very much interested in photojournalism. So I was looking at and going with the photojournalist, how do you capture the scene and everything else, and composition. So I was interested in that. And then I did like a student exchange where I was like, if I'm going to be a journalist, I need to go into broadcast, because that's when the changeover was happening from print journalism to online journalism, and kind of like print journalism was dying. So I was like, okay, I need another avenue for journalism. So I was like, okay, broadcast. I went and I took a couple of TV courses, and I was all like, screw journalism. My true passion is film.
That's
and
cool.
It was kind of like, I went in on a student exchange to New Orleans, and the television teacher there kind of like pulled me aside, and she was like, there's an assistant directing program. You are naturally an assistant director, like an AD.
Yep.
You're naturally a producer and stuff, so you need to go into that route. That is where you're not. And she didn't do that to everybody, that's for sure. Like, she kind of like pulled me aside and said, you're naturally good at this, so you need to pursue this. And that was only for selfish reasons in that class, because I wanted to negotiate the days off so that I can enjoy New Orleans. So I would go and negotiate with her, like, so when can we have this test? And does it have to be on the Monday after a really good weekend? Why can't we have it on a Friday so that the weekend's free for us? So I did that a few times on behalf of the class. And we got to enjoy Halloween because I negotiated for it.
How old were you at that time?
I was 21. I had just turned 21. Like, I turned 21, and like 2 weeks later, my dad was like, there you go, you're in New Orleans, plop, bye. And
Interesting.
I was there. And then I took that one broadcasting television class, and the teacher was like, you need to go in a different direction. So I pretty much took all of the film and directing and production classes I could at that university, and then came back and then changed my major.
And got a husband out of it.
Oh.
Yeah, that too. He was in my classes. I met him in my classes.
In New Orleans?
Yeah.
New Orleans.
He was in New Orleans. He was in my first broadcasting class. Wow. And then he was in my other film classes. So kind of like the beginning of our relationship is documented on a student project.
It sounds like a very transformational time in your life, knowing what you want to do as a career, and also meeting the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. It's
it's one of those like cataclysmic events in your life where it's like it totally changes the trajectory of everything and changes your entire perception. Up until that time, up until age 21, our community was very, very sheltering of girls. Like, you did not leave. If you left, you had to be engaged, or you were marrying off. And at that time, there was, like, me and Inga went to so many weddings from like 18 to 23 because everybody was getting married off right away. As soon as I turned 18, or right before I turned 18, people were already commenting that it was time to marry me off. And my parents were like, no, not yet, no. But that was the thing. And you didn't let your child go by themselves to a different state to study. And you didn't let them, especially a girl, how could you, So then my dad allowing was just this radical thing in the family. I remember my aunt talking to him like, how the hell are you allowing your daughter, to go, because you can't watch over her. There's going to be boys around there. You can't control her. So how can you allow that? And my dad was kind of like, well, I want her to fend for herself for a little bit, and this is the safest environment for her to do that. So, yeah, that was it. And then I went and I changed my, focus, and I met a husband, came back with red hair, with red highlights, a nose ring and stuff. I remember like one of the counselors saying, like, after she saw me after the 3-month mark, she's like, I really need to do a before and after pictures of people and how they change. Because of like when they first come and like 3 months later, because I was completely different.
That's funny. That's so funny.
Yeah, so can we go back to a little bit before that, when your family first arrived from Armenia? Just because of everything that is happening there. Even me and my heritage, like I have Italian and Swedish and Polish, and I'm German and Welsh. And so I don't have like a true connection very authentically to a culture in the way that you guys do. And with so much happening over there right now, I kind of want to like go back to the roots of it so people can really understand what it's like to be part of the Armenian culture, and how it was like for you to transition from there and come to America.
Okay, so let me tell you a few things about like Armenians that I just found out, not just, but like very recently. So we're indigenous to the Armenian highlands, which is right now in eastern Turkey, in that area. And we've been genetically isolated since the Bronze Age. Like our DNA and stuff does not correspond with any of the DNA around our neighbors. There's some intermixing, but there's almost none. And Armenians have no Asiatic DNA in us. So when Genghis Khan came through and stuff, we were still isolated, and we continue to be isolated for like 2,000 years. So our thing is that Armenians are only with Armenians, and we have to, preserve our language, our culture, and our religion is part of that. So that kind of preserves it, so that inclusivity, that connectiveness is kind of ingrained in us and in our DNA. Armenians don't mix. Another thing is because we had the genocide during World War I, where we were nearly again annihilated and wiped out. And in order to preserve the culture, we had to continue to date within and marry within to continue on. Otherwise, we would be diluted and gone. And that's like the mentality that me and Inga grew up with. Like I heard that all the time, like from adults. Like you grow up, you only marry Armenians, you do that so that, we were almost wiped out, and you have to continue on doing that. But that has been something that has been a cultural thing for us for like millennia now. So growing up in that community, where it is very, very much important to keep the language, the culture, and everything else. But during Soviet times, there was lots of difficulties, financial. There was difficulties politically for our family as well. We were being monitored because we had relatives in America. So it wasn't as hospitable for us as possible. So my parents left, and they were refugees from the Soviets. And I remember as little kids, we had to go to Moscow to get permission to leave the Soviet. And me and Inga had to go into the interview as a family. And I remember them asking, like, what does my dad do? What is his job? What are they doing? And they asked me as well, like, what does your dad do? And at that time, my dad was working as a security guard by a factory. And that's what they were saying that he was. And then my mom, she had learned English, and she was an English teacher for people who were immigrating or just needed to know the English language. So we went through Moscow, got permission to leave, and then we weren't allowed to file for like refugee status or any of the paperwork or anything like that until we were officially outside of the Soviet. So we left the Soviet Union and we landed in Italy. And in Italy, from there was several refugee families that were also fleeing, and we were met with like American representatives, I vaguely remember it, and we would go in and apply for a refugee, and that process usually took 1 to 3 months. We were only there for 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks because of Inga, because Inga was so freaking cute and adorable that when we went into, I'm serious, this is like an actual thing that happened.
Well, nothing has changed.
She was so cute and adorable, and she was very much a social butterfly. She would go to other people and be like, "Hi, I'm Inga."
How old were you at this time? How old were you and Inga at this time?
I was 3.
I was 7, and Inga was 3. So I wasn't that cute anymore. I was not going to sway anybody. Inga was the one that was going to charm people. I was just there. So Inga kind of charmed the person that was doing the paperwork. So that person pushed our family to the front of the line. And we took some other family's place that had been waiting, and they had to wait another month for their paperwork to come through. And that's because of Inga. So I just remember it being a very, very long time, and we were in Rome, and we didn't know the culture or any of the food. The other day, I just remember that the first time we ever saw scaffolding was in Italy, and like, because they were working on a building and the facade was covered in plastic, and that was like the first time that my dad had ever seen it. And he was 37 at the time, and he was just marveling at like, oh, Western technologies, like, oh my God, it makes so much more sense, like some of the stuff that was happening. And it was a bit of a culture shock for them as well, for us. So 2.5 months later, we came to America, and that was around Thanksgiving-ish, and we spent the first Thanksgiving at my father's brother's house. And yeah, that was it. And we were considered refugees from the Soviet Union.
Okay. Do you remember what you felt when you first arrived in America?
I was so glad not to have pasta for every meal of the day.
I don't remember any of this stuff she's talking about.
We had so much pasta in Italy because it was like the food and stuff was provided, but it was like pasta with sauce, pasta with tomato soup, pasta in the morning, in the afternoon, for dinner. And it was like, because you had to walk to the different hotel. So by the time you got there, it was like, okay, you had lunch. And then by the time you walked back, it was time for dinner. And then you had to walk back.
That sounds like a
dream. And I remember asking my mom, like, I don't want to have pasta for a while anymore.
That's funny. I don't remember.
I just remember being relieved that we're with, like, finally we're with family that, you know what I mean, that grow up hearing myths about, because we hadn't really seen them because it was a family in America. But then after that, it was like a lot of it is very new, but it wasn't, I don't remember too much of the beginning few months or anything like that. It's kind of like blocked it out because it was still traumatic. I remember my parents trying to call. Back then, phone calls were like, there's no Zoom. We don't see each other. And it was a Soviet bloc at the time. So it was like to get connected, and there was a big echo. And you'll notice that too, a lot of the older Armenians, when they talk on the phone and you tell them that you're talking to Armenia or you're talking to somewhere else, like far away, they'll start like yelling at the phone.
Yeah.
Because that was the only way that you could hear. And I remember like each minute was like $5. And $5 in the late 80s was a lot of money, especially for a newly immigrated. And you would only be connected for maybe 5 minutes at maximum. And it was kind of like, hello, hello. And there was an echo because, of course, it was being recorded. It's a phone call from America. And there was a lot of like, we're alive. Hello, are you alive? Yes, we're alive. We love you. And then it was pretty much that. And I just remember how traumatic it was for my parents because they were so cut off, so isolated. There wasn't other Armenian families. There was no community. There was no church. There was one store, one Armenian store. And it was surreal. We were the only Armenian family in the building for a while, and there was like maybe one other family that came after us, and there wasn't any kids to play around with. And the way that Armenia is that each neighborhood or cul-de-sac, like the buildings were built like in a little cul-de-sac type of way, where all the kids from those buildings would go down and play around, and it was in a safer area. It wasn't like in the street or anything like that. It was kind of like a controlled yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, playground yard area, just the communal yard area. So we were used to that for like, you know, having 20, 30 kids around just playing, to having no kids around, and it was just me and Inga. And our cousins were
Much older.
a lot older than us. They were 14 years, 12 years, and 10 years older than us. So they were like teenagers when we first came.
Yeah, did you guys, was
So
this
it's like
directly to Los Angeles when you moved?
Yeah.
Yeah. We flew straight to LAX, and I remember our uncle meeting us right at the gate as we were coming out of the airplane, and then walking with us through the terminal. Back then, you could do that. You can't do that now.
Simpler times.
So.
Yeah, Inga, do you remember anything being 3 years old? Or is that?
Yes, I remember very few things. I do remember the trauma of leaving and saying goodbye and feeling like they had to tear me away from my grandmother's arms. I was very, very, very attached to my grandmother. She lived
Literally.
with us. Yeah, and she lived with us, and she raised me. So everybody was crying, and I remember a lot of people tell me moments, and so now I don't know if those are my memories or because of, you know, it's been told. But I do remember the train, like, because we had to go on a train, and that moment of leaving to go on the train was so traumatic. I just remember I was a crier. I cried for everything, and I just remember crying. I remember the doors that they were talking about, like the slide doors. Remember, sis?
That was at the customs. There's a lot of firsts that some people take for granted. Like the first time, I remember the first time we ever had bananas, because my dad brought it from Moscow from a business trip. I remember the first time we had a coconut. Again, my dad brought it, and, you know, he had to use a drill to be able to cut into it. I remember the first time we saw automatic doors, which was in Moscow at the time.
Yeah.
And it was through the terminals to go to the airport. And then over there, you had to go through customs to exit. So anything that you were taking with you had to be approved. And so you know, my parents took a few bottles of cognac as a bribe, but a lot of their jewelry, a lot of the stuff that could be sold off was not allowed to leave. So they couldn't even take their wedding bands. Like their wedding bands had to be left behind. And that's also another reason why you had some
leave the country, because they felt that you were taking the riches out of the country. So if you wanted to leave, that meant you had to leave all of your valuables. So when you came here, you really, not only did you not come here with anything, but you didn't come here with anything to sell to make money or to have. So a lot of family heirlooms we didn't get to keep or have, were left behind, were sold off during the fall of the USSR, because there was just no gas and electricity, and people had to do with what they had. So a lot of our family memorabilia, heirlooms, anything of value, anything, grandfather's medals of honor for serving. So we were not allowed to have,
in World War II.
Yeah, we were not allowed to bring anything, not only of value, but of any like historical. So we came, they literally opened up your luggage and took stuff out. And took stuff out. And they didn't give it to your family to hold. It was just, it's theirs now.
If you had family there, you could hand it off to the family. That's also why they took the several bottles of cognac. There was like, okay, this bottle of cognac I'm taking as a bribe. These 3 bottles I can give away. This is one bottle that I really need to take with us. So remember that the wedding bands, my parents didn't get it until after the fall of the Soviet, like when we went back and stuff. That's when they brought them. A lot of the other stuff was gone. It wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to take a lot of things, but one thing we were allowed to take was China sets, the cobalt, which was a German company at the time, and cobalt with the cobalt blue and stuff and gold leafed. we were able to take that. That was a value, but we were allowed to leave with those. We were allowed to leave
we still all
with.
have them still. It's like our prized
We
possession.
still have it. Inga's and mine wool blankets, like actual wool stuffed blankets and stuff. Those ones came over. Pillows that were like natural feather pillows, and I think we used those pillows for like 20 years until we moved on.
Yeah.
The wool blankets, I still have mine. You know, we take them apart every few years, wash the wool, and then resew them. But those were the type of things that was allowed to leave the country. Like, but anything of value, of like precious metals, stones, anything like that, not allowed. No. And you had to bribe them to let you keep some of your own possessions. So yeah. There was a lot of bribing involved, and it was customs on exit. So you had to go through that. You know, usually you go only through customs when you enter a country. You don't go through customs when you exit it. But at that time, that's the way it was.
So I do remember seeing those automated doors, and I thought it was me doing magic tricks. So I would tell my family, look, I'm gonna do a magic trick and it's gonna open, and I'm gonna do a magic trick and it's gonna close. And so everybody would tell me that when I was like growing up. Do you remember when you would do the magic trick and you make the door open? Did you remember that? So I kind of do remember that part too. I remember us coming to our apartment. I remember our cousins giving me the oh my God, this is so funny. What's that? The clown song, Isn't This Swell? Isn't This Neat?
Oh, Send in the Clouds.
Yes. And so Send in the Clouds was a wind-up doll that was on this styrofoam. It was a clown that would move its head. I would sing
on a
this
stand.
Song.
Our cousins didn't give us.
Wow, what a heavy song.
Well, do you remember that, sis?
I remember that, but that wasn't a gift from our cousins. That was something Dad got us.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought it was the cousins gave it to us. Oh, yeah. But well, I remember Lilith winding it for me and that god-awful orange carpet. God, what was that color? This caramel.
It was something left over from like the 70s. It was just bad carpeting. It was like a mustard yellow. Okay, so once upon a time that was a shag carpet, but that had been worn down so much that it was no longer shag.
Yeah.
That's what the sad truth is.
Oh my goodness. So okay. Can you describe what Armenia is like in like the physical sense of what it is like being there compared to Los Angeles, because it's got to be like
then and now,
night and day, or when you left there to come to Los Angeles, just like that, like culture shock. I can't imagine.
I will tell you about the culture shock I got for the first time in Italy. We were in Italy waiting to come here, and we went to the bazaar
market, the open air market.
It's an open air market, yeah. And we need to get shoes. And I remember we walk into this booth, and I kid you not, I remember this man's face. He had dreadlocks, and I had never seen an African-American man before. And I just remember seeing the hair, and I just remember looking at like, this person's about to put a shoe on my foot. What's happening? And I remember my dad and my mom saying, it's okay, like, you know, and I don't remember the conversation, but I do remember the man with the dreadlocks, because I had never seen dreadlocks in my life. I had never seen a person of color in my life, ever. Armenia is so homogenous, you know, it's, you wouldn't even see, I don't know, like. A
foreigner was a Russian.
Yes, exactly. That was the extent. No,
like a Georgian or a Russian. Those were the foreigners.
or any type of, you know, Asian country.
I remember the Indians at the airport. I remember like seeing families of Indians at the Italy airport, like having seen so many people from so many different cultures and stuff.
So that was the first time, that was the first time that I remember feeling a culture shock was in Italy. And then I'm pretty sure I didn't understand Italy being very different than America. I'm pretty sure until my adult life, I thought that was the same place and same thing at the same time. You know, I didn't know that was two different places. And the other thing that I remember so vividly was one of the first things we did when we came to America was to go to a Artsakh protest.
I think that was a year after, a year or two after we were here.
I was 4, and I remember I have a picture, and it was my first march, and I just didn't understand why mom and dad were making me walk all this way. Like, I just remember, like, can you please carry me? Can you please carry me? Can you please carry me? And there's a picture of me holding the flag, whatever flag, I spread it across my chest, and I would always take pictures like this. I don't know why. She was
displaying things.
I was always like, yeah, so I have this display, and I'm just like this, yee hi, and a baby. And one of the first things I remember seeing Armenians was at this march for justice, march for recognition for Armenian genocide. I think it was Artsakh at that time. Wasn't there issues with Artsakh, sis, at that time?
The first one that we went to, which was the march for Montebello, which was the Armenian genocide recognition.
Got it.
And commemoration, that one.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was 8 or 9 when we first went to the Artsakh. Because Artsakh stuff, the Sumgait and the Baku pogroms happened like a year or two after. Because I remember the refugees coming to America at that time, because there was like a big influx of Armenians coming in, and it was after the fall of the Soviet. So it was like 91 when 90-91. When Ilona came, actually.
Yes.
Because they were part of the refugee wave. Yeah. The Armenians that were living in Azerbaijan, in that area, they were fleeing pogroms, and they were fleeing like mobs, that were coming in and searching for Armenians to kill them. So there was a big influx of them. But that's when there was a lot of Armenians here. I remember going to marches with my mom. I remember her buying like a 5-pound big bag of sugar and donating it to a church for like goodwill and stuff. But it was also after the 88 earthquake.
Yeah.
The earthquake happened in 1988, and it was like a huge earthquake. It pretty much leveled the second largest city. So Armenia's in a earthquake corridor area where a lot of earthquakes happen in that region, and because it's on like a mountainous plateau. But there's like a few tectonic plates that are shifting around. So there's like every once in a while you'll see like like a 7.6 in Turkey, or a big earthquake in Turkey, and it's just in that region. There was an earthquake that happened. It was I don't remember how big it was, but I think it was in the 7s or in like the high 6s, and because of the way that the buildings are built, it was built of stone, and the way that the masonry and Soviet style of architecture it was, there was no joints of like waving or anything like that. Like the way that the buildings are built here in America, it's made of wood, especially like in California, it's wood, so that like if there's a quake or something shakes, the building has a little bit of give. But the way that it was over there is that kind of like the buildings crumbled onto themselves, and a lot of them were natural stone, like tuff, which is like a volcanic arid rock, and the rest were just like concrete. So a lot of that stuff collapsed on itself, and the entire cities were leveled. I remember some of the pictures of it, and it was like a big international thing because a huge earthquake happened, and it was in Soviet Armenia. There was a big humanitarian aid push. You know how there's like Africa Aid or Band Aid? There was like Armenia Aid, and they did like one of those, all the stars get together and sing a song, you know what I mean, for Armenia. That's also how the Armenian Telethon started, where people would donate to a fund that would go to the government or go to the people themselves over there. At that time, also the war broke out in Karabakh for wanting independence. So Karabakh is a semi-autonomous zone that is located in Azerbaijan only because Stalin was playing politicking. He had a thing of where he would move around ethnic groups so that one group did not have, he was able to control them by putting in a rival ethnic group within their region. So Armenians were and have been living continuously and are indigenous to Artsakh since the Bronze Age, basically. And there's evidence of that there by the numerous amounts of historical sites, of monasteries. One of the first monasteries around the world that was built is built there. There's stuff from like the 3rd century. So it's like we've been there.
And they're excavating an entire Armenian village.
That went to Azerbaijan. That area went to Azerbaijan, Tigrana gift. I know. A lot of our historical sites have been handed over to Azerbaijan for their territorial integrity.
Too?
Dadivank, Tigrana gift, they both, and the one in Shushi, the Ganzar, or I forget the pronunciation of it, that went over. I know. Amaras, like the first monastery that it's a bit painful for us because we've been there and we know the significance and the importance of those sites for us, for our cultural heritage. And now they've been handed over to a nation that does not value that and is hell-bent on destroying any evidence of Armenians that have been indigenous to that land. So, and they did that in Nakhichevan. So Stalin gave Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan, which was a part of Armenia and had historical Armenia, to try to appease Turkey and try to bribe Turkey to join the Soviet Union, because he said, look, we're giving your fellow countrymen, Azeris, which are Turks, quote unquote, they're not, by the way. They are Safavid Iranians that have been given the Turkish language, that have been given a Muslim religion, but they're not culturally that. They, going back, they did not exist. The notion of Azerbaijan or Azeris in that area, in that region, did not exist until the start of the Soviet Union, which was like the late 1800s to the early, the early 19th century, during the war and stuff. So Stalin, in order to appease the Turks, gave certain portions of it. And so this one region, which was completely Armenian, there wasn't a lot of non-Armenians living in that area, he gave that to Azerbaijan with the notion that that area was autonomous, that they can self-govern, that they can have self-determination, so that they can keep their culture alive. And the Armenians did do that. There was a lot of Armenians that were living in Azerbaijan, in Baku, in Sumgait, in Magderan, certain other villages and areas that was completely only Armenian for like thousands of years. So my grandmother, she had family that had property and all that other stuff go back and forth with Baku during the Soviet times. And this was, I think, late 30s or so, 40s and stuff, like after the First War and before the Second World War too. So there was a lot of connections back and forth there. There's none now. It is illegal to be an Armenian. If you are an Armenian and you're trying to travel to Azerbaijan, you will not be let in the country. If your last name ends in IAN or YAN, you are barred from entering the country. It is the only country in the entire world where one ethnicity is not allowed, and that is Azerbaijan, and Armenians are not allowed. The latest controversy was the football player Henrik Mkhitaryan, which is like one of the really best football players. And by football, I mean soccer, like the actual international football. His team was to go into play in Azerbaijan, but he was not allowed to go because they could not guarantee his safety in that country because he's Armenian, and there's a lot of Armenophobia there, which sounds like such a ridiculous thing, but it's actually reality, where for the past 30 years, any and all issues and problems have been blamed on the Armenian population and Armenians, and because Armenians did X, Y, and Z, there's been, they have IDPs are internally displaced people, which was the refugees that they claimed to be from the 7 surrounding regions that Armenians took as buffer zones for Artsakh, for Karabakh. Well, those IDPs, those internally displaced people, for the past 30 years have not been allowed to buy property, have been kept in squalid conditions, and their numbers have increased. They've gone in from 100,000 to 200,000 to right now it's 600,000 to 1 million people have been displaced. Well, yeah, if you keep a group of people in poverty conditions and then just count how many offsprings and stuff they have, then your numbers of displaced people balloon up to 700,000 people that have been displaced. But in the true reality is it wasn't that much in the beginning of the war. It's just that those people have not been allowed to have pretty much put down roots anywhere else, with the notion that they're going to go back to the 7 regions that were just handed back, the 7 surrounding regions that were just handed back. Oh, this is such a tough topic, and it's so horrendous and traumatic, because right now I'm trying to distance myself from it, but anytime I look at it, it's horrific. They're right now committing crimes against humanity, and there's videos circulating of soldiers, of civilians, of old people that are Armenian, that are ethnic Armenians, being decapitated, killed, having their throats slashed on live air, and their mistake is that they're Armenian.
Right. They're just trying to wipe them out.
Yeah. Wipe any and all Armenians out. The newest one that just happened was these 2 villages that have been ethnically Armenian for millennia, and they were in this little strip of area where it was surrounded by Azeris, and Azeris attacked that area, encircled it, took in 60 people from that area that were defending those 2 villages, and they're captured, and now videos are emerging of POWs. Their bodies are being turned over, but their hands and their feet are bound, which means that they were alive when they were captured, and especially when their hands are being bound behind them and they've been shot and they've been killed. They've been executing villagers, of going into homes and executing. They executed a scientist, a PhD scientist.
This is ongoing right now.
Yeah, after the ceasefire.
Yeah. The ceasefire was violated 2 days ago, and I have to be very, very careful about what I say about the ceasefire. I have to be careful about who is the guarantor of the ceasefire and how they're not following through and guaranteeing the ceasefire. So there's a ceasefire. The war is still ongoing. It's just a ceasefire right now, but it's not even a ceasefire. It's kind of like whatever they can get away with. And one thing I just have to say is I don't think that the people that are perpetuating these war crimes are going to be brought to justice, because they're celebrated. There's a guy, Romanov Safarov, which was, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's an Azeri that was a military man, and in Hungary they were having military exercises from different countries, and there was an Armenian there and there was an Azeri there, and he went into the room where the Armenian was sleeping. While the Armenian was asleep, he took a hatchet or an axe, and he killed a man. And he was about to kill the guy's roommate, which was another Armenian, but the noise that the first guy made woke up the second guy, and he was able to fight the guy off. And the guy was arrested. He went in jail, and he was in jail for about 6 years. And through some negotiations, Azerbaijan negotiated for him to be transferred over to Azerbaijan to serve out the rest of his sentence in Azerbaijan, blah, 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 because he's a countryman, blah, blah, blah. As soon as his plane landed, he was given a hero's welcome. For the past 6 years, his salary and everything else was restored. He was given an apartment in Baku. He is a celebrated national hero. So if you have somebody that murders an Armenian in their sleep as a celebrated national hero, I don't have any hope for the people who are slitting the throats of 80-year-old geriatric men that are begging for their life while you hold down their arms and legs and you slit their throat. I don't think the people who did that are going to face any sort of repercussion. If anything, they'll probably get an apartment, or they're going to be celebrated national heroes. And Amnesty International is not saying anything. Good job, Amnesty International.
What the hell is the purpose of any of those fucking stupid organizations who only do anything except collect money and, protect the people of their interest, or say something when needs to be said because they're being bribed? No, the validity of all of these organizations have completely dismantled themselves and shown that they are nothing but just a
PR group, a PR.
That's it. Yes,
PR
they are. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. They have absolutely no clout whatsoever. So I'm sorry, I don't recognize the validity of these organizations at all. Mm-hmm. When the time comes for you to serve your purpose, when you're collecting all those funds, when you're collecting all that money and you're trying to be an organization and you're trying to bring your legitimacy so that you can have all these money that are being funded to you, and when it comes down to you doing your job, you turn a blind eye. You don't see any of this is happening. You're the only organization in the entire world who's able to determine whether this is happening or not. What the hell? Who's in charge of it? Who's playing this cat and mouse game? Send in the clowns.
Okay, so speaking of clowns, before the war started, there was a skirmish in July. The skirmish in July, Armenians were able to squelch that. After that, there was a huge PR pump of millions and millions of dollars by the government of Azerbaijan, because they have oil and they have money, and they have a pipeline that goes through Georgia, through Turkey into Europe. So they're providing oil, and that oil pipeline is owned by BP. To guarantee that
this is actually a British war. So can we just call this a British war then? Is that?
It's not it is and it isn't. Okay. So I mean, Turkey is Britain's dog. So
British is like, well, we don't have our hands dirty. We don't get our hands dirty. This is just our pipe and our money.
Yeah. So what the government of Turkey and the government of Azerbaijan did is that they hired several PR firms, international PR firms. They hired several other companies to raise up. And they also did a lot of, especially Azerbaijan, did a lot of caviar PR. Azerbaijan is known for their caviar as well. They have access to the Caspian Sea, so they're able to get caviar and stuff from them, and they use that as a form of PR where they wine and dine elected officials. So they wined and dined elected officials. They wined and dined officials of several organizations. They wined and dined owners of newspaper companies, of media companies, and they pretty much put out a blockade of information. So a lot of information that Armenians were trying to get out about the war was not, and whatever coverage was favorable to Azerbaijan and Turkey. It was, so a lot of the companies, and I say these companies because I don't view them as journalistic entities anymore, because they are companies, because they put profits over people.
They're corporations. Yes.
And corporations. So these companies took these monies from, and then these PR groups, and I'm talking like millions and millions of dollars of PR funds. So these PR groups put out hit pieces on Armenians. They put out hit pieces about the war. They put out false information. They weren't reporting a lot of stuff. Things like UNESCO, things like Amnesty, things like Amnesty International, like a lot of organizations that you think should be like reputable organizations have been mum. And it's been a big push from the Armenian community, specifically the diaspora, to try to get some sort of recognition, some sort of representation. There was a media blockade on a lot of things. And Armenians had to take a page from BLM blocking the freeway to get any sort of recognition of what was going on. The war was raging for about 4 days or so. Armenians were in front of the CNN building in downtown Hollywood, and protesting, and they had blocked off the streets. They had been there for night and day, the entire full night and stuff. They had been there, and there was no news coverage from CNN. There was no news coverage from the local news affiliates or anything like that of like, hey, a war has broken out, and you have the largest Armenian diaspora population. Los Angeles is home to the largest Armenian diaspora outside of Armenia. It is only rivaled by the Armenian diaspora that is in Russia. So the highest concentration of Armenians here, and it's the countrymen, and you're not, even on the local level, you're not reporting that there's a war going on and the war has broken out. So Armenians actually went down and blocked the freeway, and that was the only way to, the 101 freeway, the Hollywood freeway.
Wow.
They literally walked down the ramps that are, there's on-ramps right by the CNN building. So they went in and they blocked it. So it's like, well, if you're not going to report it, are you at least going to report this? And I remember watching the news and recording it and trying to see what they were presenting it. And it was small little blurbs of like, skirmishes have broken out, intense fighting has broken out. It's like, no, Azerbaijan attacked. It was an attack. It was a blitzkrieg. A blitzkrieg is when you throw everything as a military to try to overwhelm and bypass and go through. So the first 4 days of the war was insanely intense. And, you know, they took out 50% of the Artsakh, because the Artsakh is its own autonomous zone and has its own defense army, has its own defense, whatever is needed to be considered a republic. Artsakh has a bank, has an electoral system, has a president, has a Congress, has a military, has all the things that you would need to be considered a republic. It has its own water and power. Hydro had its own water and power, and had hydro stations, had everything that you would need to be considered an autonomous republic. So then Armenians blocked the freeway to get some sort of thing, and it is like, oh, just intense skirmishes, intense little shootouts, and you know, it wasn't being described as what it actually was, which is a war, which was one side attacked. And they was like, well, Armenians are fighting this. Armenians left the status quo. Armenians did not want war. They want peace. They want to peacefully live as they would been living there for millennia. But Azerbaijan wanted to liberate the areas for Armenians from Armenians. They kind of wanted to liberate Artsakh, not for Armenians, but from Armenians, from the people who are indigenous to that land. So for territorial integrity. And that was the only thing that was being taught, being taught it around, that this is a war of territorial integrity and that Armenia is occupying it. But Armenia is not occupying it. Armenia is not indigenous. The country. And, you know what I mean? Artsakh is this autonomous zone, autonomous region that is not occupying, has just been there. It's like trying to tell Native Americans you're occupying the reservation. It's like, are you serious?
Well, we do
What do you mean I'm occupying? I'm an occupying force.
Why are you surprised? America is, Turkey and Azerbaijan is taking a page out of America's tried and true, totalitarian takeover methods. So let's not be surprised why America's like, oh, is that what they're doing? I wonder where they got that idea from.
Oh, no, America's not going to be interested. I'm sorry, but America's not going to be interested because Armenia does not have natural resources that can be exploited. It does not have oil, but Azerbaijan has oil. Azerbaijan has lots of oil. So part of their caviar PR it worked, and it's still working. So when you have organizations like the freaking New York Times that is publishing stories about poor Syrian mercenaries, or the BBC that is publishing stories about, poor Syrian mercenaries that were tricked into going to Azerbaijan to fight for Azerbaijan, and how you should feel sad for the poor exploited mercenaries. Really? Really? What about the people that they were killing? What about the villages and the villagers that they were killing?
What about
poor villagers. No poor Armenian villagers.
What about the ISIS videos? Oh, poor people in those ISIS videos, right? No, being beheaded as in a video. Has Armenia That's the problem. See, the reason why Armenia hasn't won is because they're not as savage, because they're not killers, because they're not suicide bombers, because they're not, what are Taliban. They're not, they believe in human rights.
Speaking
they
of the
believe
Taliban.
in women's rights.
So there were mercenaries sent over, paid and sent over by Turkey. So Turkey had a recruitment center in Syria, and they recruited around 2,000 jihadists as fighters. And those guys were lied to and told that they were going to go and guard oil fields or pipelines and stuff so that the Azerbaijani army could actually go in and fight at the front. But what happened is that they were used as cannon fodder. So in the first days of the Blitzkrieg, they put those guys that were not trained, not anything. It's kind of like, here's a gun, go. Mm-hmm. That kind of situation.
Right.
Where if you tried to get back, you were shot by the Azeris. If you tried to move forward, you were shot by the Armenians, because the Armenians are protecting their livelihood, their right to exist in that area. So these guys were used as cannon fodder. It was kind of like use them because they were dispensable, and then Azerbaijan doesn't have to show that it lost 2,000-3,000 more people than it actually did, because it was not on the books. They also had fighters, terrorist fighters imported in from Pakistan. This was confirmed by actual military soldiers, and that they let it slip accidentally, praising their Pakistani brothers for coming in. They had the Turkish commanders and commandos started doing military exercises, and just happened to leave all the military equipment, happened to leave some generals, happened to leave lieutenants and people who were pretty much organizing and fighting the war. This was not a war between just Azerbaijan and Armenia. If it was just a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia and
we would have won again. We would have won again. Yeah.
Some of the stuff that I'm reading about, technologically where we were and what we were doing, I think we would have fared a lot better. It would not have been as horrific as it has been. Mm-hmm. We assumed that we had political currency currency in the international market. We assumed that people cared about Armenia.
Just human rights, period. It's not an Armenian issue. We just thought that people cared.
Yeah, we assumed that it was a human rights issue.
Yeah,
but
ethics,
nobody
morals,
cares.
Not killing. Yeah, everybody,
right.
Things
so,
for people to stand up.
The most that we got was deep concerns and urging of people to go back to negotiate.
We got deep concerns by the French. We were so happy.
Hey, the French actually acknowledged it, so that was the big thing.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So thank you for your deep concerns. That hang on.
So because of the genocide, a lot of the Armenian diaspora was spread out, but we kept our culture and our heritage alive. So you have a lot of diasporic groups from different countries. One of the big diasporas was from Syria, areas after the Armenian genocide where people went in, specifically Aleppo, those areas. And they were Armenians, and when the war broke out, Armenia pretty much said anybody of Armenian heritage is able to come and repatriate because you're Armenian first, and you can come in, and the government will work to get you situated, get you housing, help you get you on your feet, basically. So a lot of Armenians from Syria relocated, and those Syrian Armenians have been in Syria for 2, 3, 4 generations. So
and I'm just saying, can you imagine
escaping the war and then
displaced, and then having them come be prosecuted by Syrians from Azerbaijani side? Can we just understand that for just a moment? That's, come on.
Yeah, people that you thought were on your side are coming to attack you, basically.
Come on.
Yeah, your fellow countrymen that, a few months ago or a couple of years ago, you'd be, playing each other. Now you're fighting each other type of situation.
So Armenia is a country that's surrounded by Muslim countries, but Armenia is not Muslim, correct?
No.
Okay, so Armenia is surrounded by three sides by Muslim countries. You have the Azeris and Turkey and Iran. And then you have in the north, you have Georgia, not the state, the country.
But they're not Muslim.
No, Georgia is Christian actually. So they're a Christian nation as well. And if you look at their flag has like 4 crosses on there. So of course they're Christian. But Armenia has been surrounded by Muslims for a very, 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 very long time. That's why I said we've been genetically isolated since the Bronze Age, is because of that. Because we chose the Christian religion very early, and in that area there was other rival religions before Islam came through. There were the Zoroastrians, which were the Persians. There was the Hellenistic, which was the Greeks and stuff. Yeah. So, but then Armenians, they took on Christianity and pretty much said that we're Christian and that's it, as a national identity. They folded in all of their pagan customs and stuff and then into the religion itself. And that's part of the reason why the culture has survived for so long, and part of the reason why the religion has survived so long. We've been fighting to keep our identity since the Bronze Age, basically. Yeah. Not to be forcefully converted, not to be forcefully conquered. We have been conquered, we have been colonized, but we've still kept our tradition and our culture for millennia, basically. Yeah. And we didn't intermix because of religious reasons as well. Mm-hmm. So hence why. And they've done actually a study, and I read the scientific study on this, which is very, very interesting. You know how everybody's doing like these DNA tests right now, and you know, it's coming out, you're 20% this, 30% that, 30% this. Armenians, when we're doing it, it's like 99% Armenian, and that's it.
That's incredible.
I got that. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, you know, and so they were wondering like, why was this happening? And then when they did the study, I found out that Armenians are a living DNA fossil. Mm. Our DNA has not been changed for over 2,000 years. And part of the reason why is because of Christianity and being surrounded by Muslim nations. So a lot of intermixing was not allowed. When the Seljuks came, the Turkic tribes that are descendants of the Uyghurs, the Uyghurs, the ones that are in China, they came through Mongolia, through the Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan type of thing, came all the way through, slightly went south, conquering Persian Empire and a lot of the Arabic countries, and then, you know, finally ending up in Constantinople, which is Turkey, and then conquering them. So that's why a lot of the Turkish people, when they do DNA tests, they have some Armenian in them and a lot of Asiatic countries and percentage of Asian, whereas Armenians, when we do DNA tests, there's like 0 Asian. There's no Asian. And the Asian aspect of it would be the Seljuks and the Genghis Khan that came through, like the big Genghis Khan, you know, conquest and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're trying to silence your voice as a culture.
Yes, yeah, because we're, you know, it's either fold us into the culture or, you know, but Armenians had lived in the Ottoman Empire. So when the Ottoman Empire was established, we lived in the Ottoman Empire as second-class citizens for like 600 years. And then before the fall of the Ottoman Empire, there were pogroms, which is like ethnic cleansing type of things where mobs would go through looking for Armenians, pulling them out and killing them. So there were several pogroms that happened before.
It means systematic killing.
Yeah, so there was the Hamidian massacres. After that, set the stage for the Armenian genocide when the Young Turks came through, used Armenians to overthrow the Ottoman Empire, and then turned around and betrayed the Armenians and killed them with the fear that the Armenians are going to collude with the Russians. So this struggle for control of that area of the Caucasus in the highland, the Armenian highland area, has been going on since like the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. So, and it's been a struggle between Turkey and Russia, because Russia had its own vassal in that area, which was Azerbaijan and all that area, and Georgia and Abkhazia and Ossetia, all that area was under Russian control, and the Turks were afraid that the Armenians were going to join the Russian side. So they were like, well, you know what, let's just massacre them so there's not an issue, and they will have a pan-Turkic nation where that's still a big thing, is to have a pan-Turkic nation, which joins Turkey with Azerbaijan, and that joins it with all the Stan countries, all the like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, all the way through Mongolia, all the way to China. Like, so it's like,
where have I heard this before? From sea to shining sea. It's a manifest destiny. We were chosen to spread. Where was that coming from? Sea to shining sea.
Anyway,
sorry.
So,
sorry.
No. Feel free to express yourself, Inga. Feel free.
So, I mean, like this, it's still Turkey's ambitions right now is to unite all the Turkic countries into one big, huge,
to sum it up,
coalition. Yeah.
Got it.
Type of thing.
Okay.
And Armenia is standing in the way because it's in the middle.
All right. So when the news reported that there was a ceasefire, that didn't really happen.
No.
The ceasefire happened, but it's kind of like if Azerbaijan feels like violating it, they'll violate it. The ceasefire was announced about 4 times, and it was violated within minutes. And it was kind of comical to watch because they would tweet out that Armenians have violated the ceasefire before the time that the ceasefire took place. So they would, you know what I mean, like tweet at 8:01 that Armenians violated the ceasefire at 8:05, but it was 8:01. It wasn't 8:05. So they would violate the ceasefire and continue on fighting, and Armenians were obeying the ceasefire. So during the Blitzkrieg, they took out a lot of the air defense, the anti-aircraft that Armenians had. And this war was fought primarily with drones. The drones that they were used were the Israeli drones, the kamikaze Israeli drones, and also the Turkish drones, the Bayraktars. So this war was also a bit of an advertisement for Turkey for their technology. They advertised the Bayraktars, and then 2 weeks after the war had been raging, the war went on for 45 days. After the first 2 weeks of the war, Ukraine put in an order for drones, for Turkish drones. So Ukraine has an issue with Russia over Crimea. And Crimea is also another historical thing. So Crimea was ethnically Russian, but was given to Ukraine to put them into the fold, with the understanding that if Ukraine ever seceded out, that Crimea would go back to Russia. So Russia has taken back Crimea because it's, you know, following the rules of like the ancient treaties that were like 200 years old almost, which one treaty is about to expire, and that concerns Nakhichevan, which is that little area that was given to Azerbaijan on the other side of Armenia that borders Turkey right now. So those treaties, Russia's operating like on stuff that was agreed about like 200 years ago. So Crimea is supposed to go back to Russia, but right now we're in the modern age and territorial integrity is a big thing. And it's a reason for people to be like, what the fuck are you doing, Russia? Yeah. So they took that back. Ukraine wants it back because it is a port. It's an important area. So they're going to be fighting back and forth.
Russia needs it to obviously put a pipe through. That's the reason why it's taking it.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise,
it's all about oil. It's all about natural gas.
Otherwise, it's about this big, and it has a shit ton of land that has no use for it. That isn't getting used. So it's not like it wants land, or it's really about I need my fucking pipeline. It's access. That's all it is the access. So I'm gonna take it so I can have my access.
The access to get to the money.
Yeah. It's port access. That is the thing that we have to look at. It is Russia is fighting for port accesses. It needs warm water port accesses because the other ports that it has, half of the year it's frozen solid. So it needs warm water port access. So in order for it to have that, it's going to take Crimea. It's also taken a portion of Syria. So
the other side,
right
which
now,
was being disputed with Turkey, right? Wasn't a Russia just being basically they were fighting their dirty war on Syrian land. Could we just say that? Turkey and Russia?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as soon as Trump pulled out, of Syria, with pretty much said out, we don't care about that area, but they should care. As soon as they pulled out, Russia and Turkey kind of are going at it to have control. What Russia wants is a warm water port. So it negotiated with Turkey concerning Azerbaijan and Karabakh in exchange for a warm water port with Syria. So Syria, has a little areas. Russia bombs it, which is the training grounds for Turkey. Turkey pulls back. After Turkey pulls back, then Russia's able to go in and secure a warm water port, and then Russia pulls back, and Turkey is able to get some of the villages, or Azerbaijan is able to get some of the villages. I use Turkey and Azerbaijan interchangeably right now because Azerbaijan has pretty much handed everything over to Turkey, and Azerbaijan is country in name only and not specifically in autonomy. When you have the Turkish generals controlling the Azeri army, I'm considering that as one nation. And they keep saying that one people, two nations, that they're the same, but they're not really. But anyways, so in doing that, it pretty much gave Turkey an area in the Caucasus and a say-so in that area, in the region. But it also gave Russia a warm water port through Syria, a certain section of Syria. So it's all about money, it's all about port access, it's all about being able to sell their natural gas and be the only suppliers and sell their oil to Europe and be the only suppliers. So it's just like the politicking that is going on, it's so messed up, and it's just, Armenia's caught in the crosshairs of it.
Okay.
And
yeah. So when I was talking to Inga earlier, we were talking about how people sharing this on social media were kind of getting harassed.
Targeted, yes.
So, targeted. So part of the PR, remember I talked about like the PR stuff that was happening? Part of the PR was also bots, was also actual people, like a brigade, like an army. And it was so organized, it was so targeted, and it was found out, the Armenians went in that understand Azeri, was social media influencers with like huge followings in private groups, in private Facebook groups, in private Instagram groups, had docs with English, comments, just plethora of them that you can go in and copy and paste. And so they would use those, and they would say from this time to this time, we're targeting the business entities of this actor. One example I'll bring up is Cardi B. Cardi B has a big, huge following. She had the song that was Wop Wop, that came out, and everybody was following her and stuff. So she had Armenian friends and people who were Armenian and asked her, hey, can you get the word out on this? Like at least, throw in the Armenia fund so that people can raise money that needs to go in because the war's going on. So she put up something, not on her page, on her stories. The following day, her business entities, not her business entities were overwhelmed with comments and direct messages, and some of them were bots, some of them were authentic people, some like harassment, false information, all those comments that were copy pasted in those Google Docs. Those were the ones that was like uniformed. It's like the same comment several different people made, but it was different iterations of it, so it looks like genuine comments. So and you can't tell if it's a genuine account or if it's a bot, or if it's like a genuine person that is copy pasting it, or is it just a bot? And they would overwhelm any pages. And if they saw any tag that says Armenia, Armenian, the war, we're gonna win, victory, or anything like that, they would go through and those pictures. And even if you were nobody, and if you had like a following of 200 people, all of a sudden you had all these DMs just overwhelming you. One person, and I felt so bad for her, was this girl, and she was a nurse in Atlanta, and she had a following of like 80 people. It wasn't a lot of people. And she had posted something on her stories, and I commented and I said, thank you so much for amplifying our voices. I appreciate it. And the next day I see on her wall, like on her story, she's like, I am not going to stop talking about this. You can't silence me. So apparently she had become the target of all of these like bots and all of these comments and stuff that were harassing her, because she had the audacity to tweet and try to get the news out that there was a war going on and atrocities were being committed against Armenians. And she was just being overwhelmed. And her thing was like, no matter what you try to say, and I remember it because it was just like stuck at me. She's like, I've met an Armenian. He's the reason why I went to nursing school, why I'm a nurse. He paid for my classes. You can never tell me that Armenians are horrible, evil people because I won't believe you, type of thing.
So I guess my question is, when social media is being controlled by corporations and money also, like how can we bring awareness to this in a way?
Guerrilla tactics, the way we're doing effective now.
Guerrilla tactics have to be, because there's a certain aspect of it that when it goes viral, it's like, that's the thing that needs to happen for it to go viral. But
sorry, I'm going to retract. The problem, the reason why we're losing is because there are less Armenians. We're not the aggressors.
No, because we can't afford to.
We're not the aggressors.
We're not the aggressors because we can't be aggressive. We don't have a proper military to be aggressive.
Yeah,
how can you have a nation of 3 million people be aggressive to a nation of 10 million people backed by another nation of a military strength of 90 million people?
And see, that's the thing.
10 million people is Azerbaijan, 90 million
Azerbaijan
is
would not
Turkey.
have been able to fight its own fight. So that's why I'm saying.
No, it wouldn't, because they started in July. The skirmishes that happened in July, they were pushed back. They were humiliated, and what happened is that Turkey took over. And when Turkey took over, it brought in all of this technology. The past 30 years that Armenia could have been using to buy weapons and modernize its military, it hasn't, because it has been living in institutional corrupt country.
And I get it. So that's why I'm like, well, what do we need to do? Well, we need to
there's certain things. We don't need, we have not survived millennia by acting like them, Inga. Because if we were to act like them, we would have been annihilated millennia ago. Our strength is not in that. We don't have the people to fight the war. You don't have enough conscripts. You don't have enough, like, okay, let's say every able-bodied man, woman, and child from ages 16 to 59 goes off and fights. That's still not enough to be able to combat a nation of 10 million.
Psychological.
Psychological warfare. We are not there yet. We are still under psychological shock with the fact of what happened.
That's what I'm saying. So what has to happen? We need overnight. We need to become Scientologists.
So how can people who are not Armenian?
Sorry, I don't
how can no, not at all.
Inga's like very like combative.
It's understandable. I mean, I can't relate to this at all, and thank you for talking about it, because I know that it's not easy. But how can we bring awareness to this in a bigger way? How can we help?
Right now is educating yourself and amplifying and commenting on behalf of Armenians. So when you see an article that is not authentic and true, like the ones that are in Washington Post, that the ones that are popping up in reputable newspapers, quote unquote reputable.
NPR is misleading the conversation.
Okay, so in order to combat that, to combat the misinformation, you need to educate yourself of what is happening. You need to educate yourself on the history of why it is happening. A lot of this, it goes back to like the First World War and Stalin, and a lot of people don't know. I had a professor that I just spoke with recently, and I said, when the war settles down, and he was like, what war? What do you mean war? And I said, the war that broke out, that's been like a news embargo on. That's the big thing, is like, so as a non-Armenian, you need to demand those reputable news organizations to report. You need to call those journalists that are doing, that have won awards on humanitarian news coverage, on crimes against humanity news coverage. So you need to contact those journalists. You need to contact those news desks and ask them, why aren't you covering it? You need to contact Amnesty International and say, why are you not accurately reporting of what's going on? Why are you whitewashing it? It's to hold those news people accountable. It's to hold those organizations accountable. As an Armenian, they can say, it's just an Armenian is just talking. But you as a non-Armenian that do not have an invested interest that is apparent, you know what I mean? That is apparent. If you are requesting or demanding accountability and coverage, that says a lot more. You writing a letter represents a huge number of people, because like statistically, out of thousands of people, not a lot of people were going to write a letter. You know, not a lot of people are going to comment on a post. Not a lot of people. I would start tagging people on those war crimes videos, sending those war crime videos to news desks and say, why aren't you covering this? If this was in any other nations, those beheadings be 24 hours on freaking BBC. It would be on 24 hours on CNN, on Fox. Why isn't any of the religious organizations covering of what's going on to the first Christian nation? First Christian nation. Why aren't they covering that monasteries that are from like the 3rd century that are being destroyed? That churches are being destroyed. Cultural heritage is being destroyed. Where is UNESCO? Where are all those governmental and non-governmental organizations demanding, like, they can, an example is I'm working with an organization that has just formed because we saw the need for it. And they've been going to companies that have been providing drone parts and asking them, why are you supporting your parts being used in drones to kill civilians and bombing the civilian capital, which is Stepanakert, which was on consistent bombing since the beginning, since the first day of the war, which 60% of the city had been leveled, demanding accountability. Like the group I'm working with, they went to Garmin and they proved to Garmin, like with evidence, that your GPS parts are being used in drones, in Turkish drones, the Bayraktars, and those Turkish drones are being used on the civilian population of Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijan, on the civilian population of Astah. Why are you allowing that? So they went into Garmin, and Garmin was like, oh no, it's just consumer product, but they were proving it wasn't a consumer product. It was a military grade drone part, and they got Garmin to take off, to nullify the contract and no longer supply those parts. You as a non-Armenian can call your representatives, write to your representatives, and demand accountability on your tax dollars. Why are your thank you, like you did, darling.
I do that.
Why are your and Feinstein's an idiot? I swear to God, she's a freaking dement. Anyway, so why are your tax dollars, your hard-earned tax dollars, instead of going to you, which right now that it's COVID that you needed more than anything else, why are those tax dollars being sent as military aid to Azerbaijan? Why are those tax dollars used to send military aid to Turkey as a NATO country? Why are your tax dollars being sent over there to oppress? And let's leave it as, and I'll lay it out there. When Obama was president, Obama was giving $100 million in aid to Armenia, an equal amount of $100 million in aid to Azerbaijan. When Obama left and Trump took over, Trump slashed the yearly aid to Armenia from 100 million to not even 15, it was like 14.5 million, and raised the Azerbaijani military aid to 120 million. Why are your tax dollars going to that country, that incredibly oil-rich country that has a pipeline, that has all those natural resources? Why are your tax dollars going over there instead of going to you? Why does the American people need to go to food banks? Because they are food insecure, because their tax dollars are going to freaking fund the killing of civilians. Why is that acceptable? Where's accountability in that? Why are there no sanctions? So that you as an American, you as a non-Armenian can demand accountability from your government for supporting another government that is doing that. You as an American can demand, why are your tax dollars being going to corporations and companies that are supplying drone parts? Why are you subsidizing those companies? as a taxpayer when they're making millions and millions off of the suffering and killing of indigenous people. Indigenous people that have lived on that land for millennia are being forced off of their homeland.
And it's not hearsay. There's actual physical evidence at the moment verifying first century artifacts of the indigenous people that are literally there. It's in the fucking ground. So sorry. That's why I was crying, because I went and I saw that. I saw the excavated first century pots that have been made by Armenians. Don't tell me Armenians that this land is disputed whose it belongs to. When you're digging it up and you're digging up Armenians and you're digging up Armenian artifacts, guess what? It's indigenous Armenian land. The actual church, the Christian church, the church that you don't believe in, that is standing there and it's 3rd century, that you do not pray to, lets me know that, guess what? You weren't there to begin with. This is not yours. So the fact that we're disputing land, indigenous land, the fact that this is theirs and ours, who are they kidding?
It's hard to wrap your head around it, because unless you are under threat, unless that, like, there's no, like, I think for Americans, it's hard to grasp the fact that your country is in threat of not existing anymore. Mm-hmm. That the place that you were born to, the place that you are connected, like that where your ancestors have been buried for thousands of years, that all of a sudden you don't have access to that anymore. All of a sudden you are not allowed to go there anymore. That is not yours anymore.
Right. We don't understand having that reverence for something.
No.
Like I mean, I lived in America for 30 years, and I had not been back for about 25 years until about 5 years ago. So we went to Armenia, and then we went to Artsakh. And I've traveled a lot, and I've never felt the connection to the actual soil, to the land, in any country other than my own. And when I went to Armenia, I felt the pull of the land. I felt like, okay, this is me. This is where I come from. This is my country. This is my people. I feel like I'm connected. Like I feel the energy, the presence.
Right.
I felt that the strongest when we went to Karabakh.
Yeah,
when we went to Artsakh, and Artsakh and Karabakh are the same thing, it's just interchangeable names. When we went to Artsakh, I felt such a pull, a connection to the land, to the history, to the people there. I felt like those were my roots, as if I am like literally touching my roots, and I've never felt that in anywhere else, in any other country, and I've traveled a lot. I've traveled in America, I've traveled in Canada, and I asked my husband, because he's Canadian, I asked him, like, do you feel connected to Canada when we travel there? Do you feel the pull of the soil? Do you feel the spirit, that energy, like this is yours? And he said, no, not really, sometimes. And his people have been, like his family has been in Canada since like the 1600s. So I'm asking him, do you feel that? And he's like, no, not really. And I feel that, and I did not believe that it was, that I could feel that until I went back, and until I was able to appreciate it. And now I can't go back to a lot of those historical sites. I can't go back to the place where the kingdoms that my people have been, you know what I mean? Like, and it's so, I can't explain that to you what it's like. And I, you know what I mean? Like, in the way that the people.
Okay, Inga. Yeah.
It's so emotional.
Hard.
Like,
it's so hard.
And when you say,
because I mean,
it's the amount of love and pride that some Americans have for their country, that they're willing to die for it. They're willing to sacrifice everything for it. I don't think that they can grasp that there's a threat that America there can come a time where America is not going to exist anymore.
Right.
I don't think they understand that. I never understood what an existential threat literally meant. And Armenians, and it's an existential threat of like, you are no longer going to have a homeland, that the threat of a genocide, of a second genocide, and it is a genocide, it is a cultural and physical genocide, and that is happening. And the biggest thing for us is that the international world doesn't care, because we don't have anything to offer than Armenian barbecue. We have khorovats to offer. We don't have natural resources in, you know what I mean? We don't have diamond mines like Russia does.
The one thing that we put value, which is hospitality, the one thing that we cherish the most as a culture, is the thing that is actually working against us and preventing us from surviving, because that's what we do. We're hospitable people. We open our doors, we let people in, and that's our biggest mistake, is because we let the wrong people in. All of our neighbors want to go into our homes with ill intentions. So, and you know what? Has that stopped us from being hospitable? No, not at all. We're still considered one of the most hospitable people.
Absolutely.
We would first give half of our food to somebody else when we're hungry, just so that we can show humanitarianism to the person as well. We
have fables that pretty much say that somebody that is a traveler, you need to revere them because they're special, because they're traveling the world, and that you need to show them the hospitality that you know.
And that's why we're taken advantage of. That's why we're a group that's been taken advantage of and exploitados. I don't know what's the right word for that. Degraded, taken advantage of. I mean,
yes. So it's like a humanitarian. It's a humanity thing. It's a humanity.
Yeah.
Issue.
It is. I mean, like, it's such a huge humanity issue, and the thing is that whatever so far that has been able to be accomplished is because of the Armenian diaspora and the personal relations. A lot of Armenians, when the war broke out, and it was like a switch turned on in every Armenian's mind of like, I need to do something, and this is what I'm going to do. And it was as if,
don't like, tell Clay, but I wanted to this is so bad, but I really was like, oh shit, I really need to have an Armenian baby. Like, I don't care. I just need, I was like, who can I ask? Which of my friends can I ask that I can like get their sperm so I can have an Armenian baby? I'll have a baby with Clay, but I really want an Armenian baby. And I was like, who do I know? It's so sad.
We pretty much, like, when the war broke out, everybody just knew what they instinctually knew what they needed to do. Like,
because we've been always told that the Turks will come back. We've all I've ever heard since I was a child was that the Turks came and you have to be ready because they're coming back. And sure as shit, this was it. Everybody was like, oh fuck, we thought the world kind of got it together, and we're like, oh no, this is all over again. We're starting from zero.
And whatever we've been able to accomplish, and it was like, you know, it was like an ant farm where everybody, like, you know, knew what they needed to do instinctually, or like a beehive where everybody just was a worker bee. And if you knew if you had access to be able to fundraise, you were fundraising. If you had access to be able to, you know what I mean, get supplies, you were getting supplies. If you had access to information, like for me, it was information, and the information warfare I saw online. How to combat it? How do you know what I mean, like. And for a while, I was just on my own of like, okay, trying to combat disinformation, trying to find out exactly what's going on, inform people, you know what I mean, like, and help others that were in the process of getting information out there and amplifying other people's voices. And so it's whatever's everybody's strength, that's when they went to do. And it's the same way in Armenia as well. I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, a fellow filmmaker in Armenia, and she said that a way that everybody just mobilized was so fascinating and so like inspiring that we kind of went, oh shit, nobody gives a fuck, and we're the only ones that are gonna save ourselves. And all the political clout and PR that we thought we had internationally had evaporated, and whatever we were able to accomplish was the diaspora itself and its relationship. So if I knew somebody that was in PR, if I knew somebody, I would contact them on my behalf and have them start working it. There's lots of lawyers that are Armenian, so a lot of and businesses that are Armenian owned in Los Angeles. And one business, which is the Papillon Bakery, they took up the boycott of Nutella.
Nice.
Another business that is a lawyer, a law firm, took up the misinformation and mislabeling and fraud labeling in food, whereas Armenians are trying to boycott Turkish products, and what they're doing is they're sending Turkish products to Britain and slapping a British sticker on top of it, and it obscures where the country of origin is. So when then you peel back, you see that it's a Turkish product. But a lot of the information is, so it's fraud and food labeling. So a law firm has taken up fraud and food labeling. Another law firm has taken up the drone parts. The company, the organization that I'm working with, their main focus in the beginning was drone parts. And the reason I got with them is because while I was doing some research and trying to gather as much information so that I can document and know and make a movie about this later on, was I found a list of all the drone parts and the companies that make them. And I sent it to a friend of mine that was working with them. And I said, hey, do you know, I found this list. And it was kind of like everybody helping each other out. Mm-hmm. And it was inspiring, but at the same time, it's sad that it had come to that right. We had no political clout, that for 30 years we had wasted the resources that we could have had because our country was run by oligarchs. A little bit of history. Armenia had a velvet revolution 2 years ago where they peacefully transferred over in government. I'll talk a little bit about that later. That's just a whole nother thing and how that led to this war and how for 30 years this war had been put off. And it came to the point where it was a powder keg situation where everybody's attention was turned on to American politics. Everybody was dealing with COVID, and the entire world's attention was just strewn away. So it was a perfect time for the war to kind of explode. So for 30 years, they could have been prepared. We were being told for 30 years the Turks are coming. I don't know why the government wasn't in on it, that the Turks are coming and that you need to have a proper military, you need to have proper, military training and regiments and equipment and training
I think it's worth mentioning that there are Armenian speaking Turks in Armenia. Let's just say that. And that's the opposition. So there's
by Armenian speaking Turks, what we mean is there's a quote with Garagin Nejde, and he was a general in the First World War and stuff, and he's a national hero. He pretty much said that the threat is not the Turks, but is the internal Armenians that think and act like Turks. Mm-hmm. So for us, somebody who thinks and acts like a Turk is somebody that is violent, that only cares about themselves, that is only protecting their own skin and their own gains in it, like their own goals and their own pockets. It's not thinking about communally. So if you're an Armenian, you have to think communally. For us, it's like, okay, what are other things? And we have a lot of national shame of like, you need to act appropriately. You're bringing shame to the nation. So,
sorry.
I'm just going to let that
hold.
pass.
Yeah.
Hold sound.
Hold sound.
Hold for sound. Sorry, it's instinctual right now for me. Hold for sound.
It's so funny, all three of us just were like, oh.
Yeah, so they had the Turks, and before the Velvet Revolution, we had oligarchs who were running the country. And by oligarchs, I mean people who have privatized companies and privatized so much of the country for their own pockets and their own gains without thinking about how people are going to be. There's been a mass exodus from Armenia, so that's why a lot of the Armenian diaspora is larger than the actual native population in Armenia. So the diaspora right now, I've seen numbers fluctuate anywhere from 6 million to 10 million, whereas the population of Armenia is around 3 million. So if you have a diaspora that is twice the size, let's say it's 6 million, Why? Why couldn't those 6 million people live in the country? And it's because it's been of an economic fleeing, because people are not able to make money in the country. A lot of the businesses have been turned into monopolies, and everything has been privatized. And everything that is being privatized, there's no competition, there's no room for small business. And if you had tried to put a small business before, you would have had people come in and persuade you to sell your business to them, or otherwise you would be persuaded. It was very much run like mafia style, like either your brains or your signature is going to be on the contract type of situation. So a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people who did not have the political or financial clout left the country and established amazing, successful diaspora centers. Some of the most successful diasporic centers around the world. If you think about Armenians as a diaspora, we have that because we've had it for hundreds of years, but it's out of necessity, because first we didn't have a homeland, appropriate homeland, and then afterwards our appropriate homeland was being ransacked by crooks and criminals, like actual people that sold off Armenian lands for their own financial gain. And that was writing down that they were buying equipment and military equipment, but instead it was pocketing the money and getting shoddy equipment. So Armenians were fighting with 19th century spirits, using 20th century equipment in the freaking 21st century. How do you fight a modern war with antique weapons? Like literal antique weapons from the Second World War, like Russian weapons. How do you fight that? And so it's a losing battle. A lot of the Armenian military needed to be modernized, but modernization takes money. So what happened with that money? That went into the pockets of oligarchs. So I have to say that the losing of the war, it wasn't just one reason. It was so many things compounded on each other. The apathy of the international community, the financial and PR incentives for the blockade of information and disinformation, the years of economic congestion and rape of natural resources. So many different things led up to the situation it is now. And a lot of Armenians right now are in psychological shock, and they're going through the 5 stages of grief. And this is universal. Any and all Armenian you talk to and ask, and you ask them, like, how are you doing? And it's a lot of like, same as everybody else, because it is, everybody feels the same way. There's no happy Armenian right now, other than the oligarchs, because they're thinking that they can do a coup right now and take back control. So those are the only people that are happy right now, and the Turks. So that's why we say internally Armenian-speaking Turks. It's referring to those oligarchs, the people who made the situation possible and compounded the situation in such a way that led to where we are right now.
So basically the Armenians who weren't staying true to the Armenian true culture and voice, the authenticity of everything.
Yeah, they abdicated. They abdicated their responsibilities and their national priorities and their own culture. Due diligence. Just so much abdication.
If we can go back to when you went to visit the indigenous portion of Armenia.
I'm gonna start crying again.
It's welcome. It's okay. Let it out. Can you describe like what that feeling was, if it had a voice to you?
I felt like my ancestors were speaking to me. I felt so connected to the land. I felt like this energy just coming out, and I felt like I belonged. I felt like this is where I belong in the world. Like this is part of my people, my history. Like I felt connected. And I've never felt connected like that in LA. And I've grown up in LA. A lot of my formative years were here. But I've never felt like the pull, the energy. I felt content there. Eating the food in Artsakh, I've never tasted a cucumber as sweet
Ever.
and as cucumbery as I did over there. The food, the people, the hospitality, the people were, I can't describe when I say like, okay, so William Stamboltsyan has that infamous quote that, the famous quote that says, when two Armenians meet, that they will create a new Armenia. And that spirit, I've experienced that spirit of like finding each other. And it's just like this little spark that you feel whenever you find another Armenian somewhere else. And it's only like a tiny little spark, but over there, I feel like it was a waterfall of that spirit there. Like I felt so, like I feel like I went to where the fountain of youth is. It's like the fountain of Armenianness. I felt like I was drinking from like the rivers of Armenianness. Like I've grown up with Mastiro Saryan. My mom loves art, so she had a lot of natural paintings and stuff of it, or replicas of paintings of Armenians and of historical Armenian lands. And so I felt like I was in one of those historical paintings. That's how it felt. I felt like this is my people. Like I was like, is this what other people feel in other countries, in their home countries? Like, is this what everybody feels? And I think that's what I can't. It was, and I felt like that Armenianness, that Armenian spark of like when two Armenians meet somewhere in the world, and it's like that tiny little, it's like a drop of that, and that drop feels like it was rivers and rivers of it, and it was concentrated there, and it was that spirit, and it was like nothing else. And I told Inga when we were there, it's like I fell in love with our talk, and I want to go back. I feel the pull of it. I felt it more than I felt it in Yerevan, and I was born in Yerevan. I felt more of that spirit over there than I did in the city that I was born in. And I can't describe it. It was like stepping back in time. There's no villages in America. There's no like villages in the modern world. There's no understanding. It's like little townships and hamlets and all that stuff, but like actual villages. That's what it had there. It was history. And the people were so pure and honest. Like it wasn't.
That's why they're getting.
Modern society hadn't polluted it yet.
Taken advantage of because of that.
Like the people of Artsakh, we consider them our Spartans. They have that Spartan fighting spirit. They have that in them. They are our Spartans. And it's horrendous. Me and Inga, when the war broke out, when we had gone to Armenia, we had gone to Artsakh, we had a driver, and he was my age, and he had 3 sons. And that was 5 years ago. And his oldest son, I think at the time, was, I want to say, 10 or 11 years old. And me and Inga were talking about it, and she was like, do you think that he's out there fighting? I said, I'm sure he's fighting, and I'm sure his oldest son is there with him. And he was our driver, and he was the one that was from there, and he had taken us pretty much to everywhere that he wanted to take. He was like, at the end of it, because it was like 4 days, and he was our driver for 4 days, and we had been spending so much time with him. He would pick us up in the morning and just take us to different locations all throughout and tell us about the history. He was also somebody that had served in the army pretty high up. And so he was talking about like the first war that happened, and how what had happened in the areas and so on and so forth. And the spirit and his spirit of it, it was just, I can't describe it. And Inga asked, like, do you think he's there? And I'm hoping to God that he's okay, and his sons and his wife, that they're okay. Obviously, my aunt still has his contact information, Ing. So
okay, we should. Probably it's going to be hard.
Maybe she can reach out. You know what I mean? If we need to sponsor a family, maybe we can sponsor his family.
Yeah, Inga, is there anything you'd like to say? You don't have to, but I know it's hard. I know that it's hard. I don't understand. It's hard. Yeah.
like, okay, I don't cry, and I've been crying. Like, Inga knows me. Like, it takes a lot for me to cry, and I've been like breaking out.
Stopped crying. That's the problem. I've just been crying. Like, it's just been it's taken such a psychological toll on me, for sure.
It's you go through you literally go through the stages of grief. And I remember, like, I was on like the anger stage, and I called Inga, and I was just so angry at the situation, and I was so angry with everything and everybody and the disinformation and the Armenian people. And it's like, don't be susceptible to propaganda and all that stuff. And then 3 days later, I called my dad to see how he was doing, and he was in the angry stages, and I just let him like yell at me for like 2.5 hours for him to get his anger out. And you go through the stages of it. And right now, everybody is oscillating between grief and depression. We're not on acceptance yet. Okay. Well, yeah, some people might be, but we're not.
On top of it, they attacked during a global pandemic too, when everyone is
that was on purpose.
Yeah, and the COVID has exploded in Armenia, and that's another thing too. It's like, well, half of the hospitals are filled with veterans, you know, that are missing limbs or having, you know, things amputated, and you know, an entire generation of conscripts. And the conscripts age is 18 to 20. A lot of them are like an entire generation. And if you like calculate the numbers per capita, we've lost as many people as America lost in the Vietnam War. If you statistically, if you calculate it that way, this is devastating us on a generational level. And the boys that are coming back from the war need like deep psychological help because of the trauma that they've gone through. And it's not just the regular war trauma, it's the psychological aspect of having
warfare aspect of it.
The psychological warfare aspect of it, having people be decapitated, having civilians be shot in their homes, civilians that are sick and not. There was an incident where the Ombudsman from Artsakh, which is the human rights ombudsman for the United Nations, it's like an advocate, where he showed a man who was physically, how do you say it? I forget the word. Hashman Daminga. Disabled. Yeah, who was physically disabled. Him and his mother were in their house in the village, and it's not like they're fighting. It's not like he can hold up a gun. He can barely hold up his hand, and he was shot through his hand, which means that he was holding up his hand as in to show that I am unarmed, and he was shot, and his mother was shot in their home. And like when you have those kinds of things, when you have a grandfather being held down and decapitated while he's alive and begging for his life, and you have that as an aspect of war, and you have that, and the men that have gone through that and they're coming back, how are they going to be psychologically okay to have a family, to raise a family? How do you not pass on intergenerational trauma to the next generation? How do you prepare them for the coming wars? And this isn't over. This is just a ceasefire. This can erupt in March, when the Treaty of Severus expires, which is 180 years ago, when the land of Nakhchivan needs to go back to Russia. Or in 5 years, when Russian peacekeepers are going to be leaving the area. And if they don't leave the area, it's extended for another 5 years, or indefinitely. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, how do you prepare for all of that and psychologically, and not raise up a nation of people who are re-traumatized? We were like 100 years after the first Armenian genocide, we were coming to terms with the intergenerational trauma that had been passed to us through our great-grandparents and grandparents that went through the first genocide. And we were right now just reconciling that and trying to figure out, how do we not pass that on to our next generation? And this happened. So it's just, how do you not do that? how do you raise a nation that is psychologically healthy and able to compete in international marketplace, into the world, when you've just had a war and you've just had that generation, the youngest generation, and we call them the golden generation, because they're the generation that made the Velvet Revolution possible. They are the ones that pretty much helped carve out the new society, and then they went 2 years later to go and defend it. And now they're coming back, and we have a niece that is the same age as them, and she's got classmates. Like half of her class is gone. The men are gone. And how do you reconcile all of that? And how do you move forward? And that's why it's like everybody's under psychological shock. How do I not pass down this trauma to my children?
And you know what? For a very long time, I was really upset at mom. I was really upset at mom for making me go to all those marches as a kid. And I just remember hating, like, being made to remember a war that I had nothing to do with. And I just remember
we didn't understand the threat. We didn't understand the threat because it wasn't explained to us. It was kind of like, because the trauma that they went through, and the most that they could process was to warn us that the Turks are coming again. That was the only thing that they were able to verbalize and to explain. If they had a vocabulary to be able to explain it to us differently, then we would have understood.
I was angry. I was like, why do I have to keep doing this every year? Like, I don't want to be Armenian anymore. And I feel so fucking guilty for saying that now, that I wanted to have an Armenian baby.
Listen, you are the mother. You will have an Armenian baby.
So much guilt. So much like, I should have been more Armenian. I should have talked more Armenian. I got radicalized overnight.
It does. If you weren't radicalized before, you're radicalized now. Yeah. If you were not super Armenian before, you are super Armenian now. And right now, my thing is that before I was involved in American politics, I was like, I'm going to do this and X, Y, Z, but this has pretty much woken the diaspora and given everybody a purpose, has given them a focused purpose. Right now, the only thing that matters to me is Armenia and the Armenian people. That's the only thing that matters right now for me. For me, it's first and foremost is that. And the reason for that is because the world doesn't care. If the world cared, then I would have room and space to care for other nations, other countries, other peoples. Up until now, it's been like solidarity. BLM, I'm standing with you guys. My Sona communities, I'm standing with you guys. I'm standing with this, and I'm standing. And one time came for people to stand with me, with us, we were alone. Well, this has radicalized an entire generation, and the diaspora is waking up. The diaspora has been complacent. We have been just, working for ourselves, supporting our families over there. We have been doing this. But right now, the goal of every Armenian diaspora and every Armenian is for Armenia. Whatever you're doing as a business, as a job, right now, the number one goal is for the betterment of Armenia and Armenians.
I gave all of my Armenian students 50% off. Sorry. Yeah, I did. I was like, you're Armenian, you get the Armenian 50% off.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like giving the oxygen mask to yourself in an airplane before you take care of someone else. It's like putting yourself in that process of healing and everything that you have to go through in order to be even able to help other people. Yeah.
And it's like my focus right now is, before I wanted to make movies that were, thought-provoking and poignant. I wanted to contribute to the cultural fabric of society, and that was my focus. Right now, my focus is Armenian movies. I need to amplify Armenian voices. I need to amplify Armenian characters. I need to amplify Armenian directors, producers, writers, anything and everything that has an Armenian tiny bit of it has to be there. If I'm making a movie and there's no Armenian character, I will put in an Armenian character. If I'm making a movie and I am casting, I will call in the Armenians and give them a shot at auditions. And I actually did that. There's a mutual friend of ours, Anush, which is Inga's friend, and I think you know Anush also. I met Anush when I was doing a college film, and we were casting, and I got her headshot in, and I was like, she's not appropriate for the role, but she is Armenian, and I'm going to call her in for an audition. From now on, I'm going to have to. I always call in Armenians. If I see them going for something, I will call them in for an audition. I will give them that opportunity. If I see an Armenian that is a cinematographer, I'm going to try to go with him. If I see an Armenian that is a gaffer, a grip, a crew person, I will try to hire as many Armenians as possible. My focus has changed. My focus is for films that show the Armenian perspective, that show the Armenian voice, films from Armenian Diaspora, films that highlight the Armenian experience in the diaspora, anything and everything that has to do with an Armenian. That's pretty much going to have to be my focus now. Now I want to contribute to the cultural fabric of society by making Armenian films.
Yeah,
I need to amplify Armenian voices.
Yeah,
because we don't have a voice in the international marketplace. I'm tired of being asked what an Armenian is instead of where Armenia is.
Right. If you could give Armenia a voice, if you could define it in the international marketplace, what would it say?
Mm-hmm. That we exist and that we have a history. Right now it's existence.
We matter.
That right now it's existence. Armenians have contributed so much to in
lives
forms
matter?
of
Yeah,
science.
really? Okay, so where are you if all lives matter? Where are you?
Okay. Yeah, if all lives matter, where's all lives? If Christian lives matter, where's that coalition? Where are all those other coalitions or those organizations, those groups? So right now, if I can give Armenia a voice, I'm going to say that they matter, that we exist.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any of that in the international marketplace. We are more than just a genocide. That's another thing too.
Yeah.
A lot of the Armenian films that are out there that have Armenian voices are only about the first genocide.
Right.
There's not a lot of movies that are coming out that just give the Armenian experience of what is it like to be a diasporan.
I understand a little more why Vahik wanted to make the film that he made too with Tenny.
Yes, let's talk about that a little bit. You're Armenian by proxy now.
You are. See, when I was talking to Vahik in the beginning and we were discussing about the film and the importance of the film and stuff, and I kept telling him this film is very important for our culture. It's important for our community. And it wasn't that because of the story is earth-shattering, it is amazing or anything like that, but it's the fact that it's just a representation of a diasporan in a country.
It's the Armenian experience. Same thing with
the Armenian experience, that it's not that different, but at the same time, we still try to preserve our culture. When he's dancing around to the Armenian music in the kitchen, I'm the one who picked the song and I'm the one who put it there. And I was all like, you need to be dancing to Armenian music. If anything, this is the one time that you need to have Armenian music in it.
Definitely. So, yeah, it really opened up my eyes, just being on set, being one of the only people not speaking Armenian, because I could really
it was kind of unfair to you. I'm sorry.
No,
there was a few people.
It was okay. It was totally okay. But because I didn't understand the language, I definitely was able to understand the energy, and it was beautiful. And you just have such a reverence for your culture that I just have no way to even identify with. And so
I think it's out of necessity.
Yeah.
That reverence is out of necessity, out of the threat of disappearing. There's no threat of Americans disappearing. There's no threat of Italians or French or any other country that is big of disappearing, but there's a threat of Armenians disappearing and Armenia disappearing. Do you know about Assyrians? Who Assyrians are, where their country would be? See, and they've been a nationless people for a very long time. Same with Kurds. The Kurds, they're nationless. And that threat of being nationless is it's horrifying. It's that existential threat. And because of that threat, it's like, well, you have a bigger appreciation for your culture, your food, and what is being Armenian. It is a genetic thing, but at the same time, it's also a culture. Mm-hmm. So what are the aspects of that culture? It's the language and the food. So you have to learn the language, you have to speak the language, which our mom pretty much did. And Armenians in the diaspora, does not matter when you were born. You can be third, fourth, fifth generation. If you have strong ties, you speak Armenian. Mm-hmm. That is part of you being Armenian, is knowing how to read and write. And that is one of the things that isolated us genetically as well, is that we had a written language where we have our own alphabet. And our alphabet, until the Mesrop Mashtots signified and said, this is our alphabet. Until then, we were using the Turkish alphabet, we were using the Greek, specifically the Greek alphabet, but written in Armenian. So you use the Greek letters to write in Armenian. Like sometimes Armenians use Latin letters. yeah, transliteration, which is wrong actually, and I agree that transliteration is wrong. But you learn the language, you learn the alphabet, and you learn that, and that's one of the things that keeps the culture alive, is the speaking of the language and reading and writing. Another aspect is the food. So a lot of us pass down our traditions, our foods, whatever we make. And that is something that a lot of Armenians learn, how to cook. Yeah. That's part of our culture. Armenian men, if you do not know how to barbecue, you are not considered a man. At age, I remember our cousins, the male cousins, at like 13, they were already going, 12, 13, they were standing next to their dads, next to the fire pit, or the mangal, which is like the barbecue, the Armenian barbecue, and they were standing next to them, and they were learning when to turn, the kebabs, when to turn the spits, when to cook, when to pull off, and that culture gets passed down. Armenians love to celebrate. We like to drink, but only when in groups. So we need a reason to get into groups, to have a party, to drink. Nobody sits and drinks alone. Like if you sit and you drink alone, you're considered an alcoholic. So if you want to drink, you have to have like 3-4 people come over, at least. So it's in a group setting. So in order to do that, you cook the food. So any and all reason for a get together, and getting together is in those parties. We don't do it now as much as we used to do before. You get together in those parties, in those dinner parties, you would cook, you would eat the food, and everybody did the thing, and then you would sit around the dinner table, you would sing Armenian songs, you would sing old Armenian songs, and then if anybody knew poetry, they would start to recite the poetry. And then you start dancing, and you would dance Armenian in the house. My husband, Jeff, he's like, you guys are the only people that I know that actually dance at house parties. Like we actually get up and dance at house parties, and dancing is also another form of our culture. So we keep the cultural things alive, and that is part of Armenianness. And Armenians are Armenians regardless of where they go. If I move to the moon, I'm not going to be a Moonshin. If I move to Mars, I'm not going to be a Martian. I'm going to be an Armenian. So if I move to Italy, I'm not going to be an Italian. I'm still going to be an Armenian. Right. And that is the thought process of every Armenian around the world. We are Armenian first, and then everything else second. I'm an Armenian first. I'm an Armenian filmmaker. I'm an Armenian sister. I'm an Armenian diasporan. I am an Armenian first. Number one is that. And so what does that entail? Do I speak the language? Yes. Do I read and write? Yes. Do I cook the foods? Yes. Do I do the dances? Yes. Is there any other cultural aspect left of that? Whatever it is, yes. I do the traditions. I do some of the traditions that are considered pagan. Like every February, since I got married for the past 10 years, I would go and I get the fire and bring it to the house for the jumping over the portraying, which is when you jump over the fire. We play the pagan games of like Vatavad, which is like the big water fight. We play, we have Zahkazat, which is like the flowering festival. So there's certain
then
things.
We also have
salt cookies.
Salt cookies. That's right. She knows.
The salted cookies. Yes, the salted cookies. So a lot of those things, even wherever we are, we still celebrate. We still celebrate Armenian Christmas, which is January 6th, because we go by the old Gregorian calendar. We celebrate the Old New Year, which is like the 13th, the 14th of January. You know, we still have cultural things that we celebrate that are part of our culture, that's part of being Armenian and part of Armenianness, and that's how you pass it on. So when Inga says they want to have Armenian babies and stuff, I know that, like, even though I'm not married to an Armenian, which is, you know, big heresy on my part, I know that my children are going to grow up being Armenian because I am the mother. I am the one that is going to be speaking the mother tongue. I am the one that is going to be teaching them the traditions, the music, the songs, the poems, all of that. Mm-hmm. So it is my responsibility to pass it on to them and to instill the love of their country and then love of their people and love of their culture, and for them to have the love so much of that they will pass it on to their next generation. It is a responsibility of every Armenian to pass on Armenianness. And my mom
anybody
did
want to
that.
help me break this to Clay, you guys? How do I tell?
I'll talk to him.
We'll just send this podcast to him whenever it is. We'll be like, it'll be a surprise.
He'd be like, "Hey Clay, start making Armenian babies. That's it."
Yeah.
He's gonna turn into an honorary Armenian. He needs to start learning the Armenian language. You know, start speaking Armenian.
Well, the problem is he's not genetically Armenian. I can have a child with him, no problem.
We need a little genetic infusion, Inga. We need a little bit of genetic infusion, just a little bit.
He can carry the Armenian spirit inside.
Okay. Y'all
just as long as your kids marry Armenians.
Yeah, right.
Just make sure, Inga, your kids marry Armenians, and then you know what I mean. That's kind of folded back into, you know, the Armenianness thing. That's all.
Poor mom. Do you see what I put her through not dating an Armenian? I'm not going to do that to myself.
All right.
Yeah. So we either have to, you know, teach Clay Armenian or teach him how to make baklava or teach him the food.
Inga. Why not both?
You know, I think that your child will be Armenian just by you being the mother.
Now he is. Shit. Now, before I was like, yes, I'm an Armenian. I'm an American Armenian. No, now all of a sudden,
I'm not American. I'm Armenian.
I'm 100%.
But just me, like we've been friends for maybe 3 or 4 years now, and so just me being around you, like, I feel like your Armenianness has like rubbed off on me.
Yay!
Like, you know, like, because we're constantly talking about it. We're constantly, like, I'm constantly absorbing what's going on.
That's true.
So that has a ripple effect, I feel like.
Okay.
So don't put too much.
Yes. I share with you as you know, because you're my friend, and you're probably also, you're just getting to know me as an individual, but so much of that is, I guess, dipped in Armenian that it's hard not to have a salted cookie.
or have a spread of refreshments when I'm there for like 5 minutes.
That's true. That's true.
Say hello. So
that's a very Armenian.
I didn't know that was an Armenian thing. Yeah, I didn't know that was an Armenian thing. I thought everybody did that. Like, what do you mean? Okay, so you invite somebody over for tea. You just give them a cup of tea? That's it? Nothing to accompany them?
Or if they just come to your house for no reason, like no tea or no, you know, dinner, but when they do come, you know, it's there.
Just there.
It's so funny. I don't think of that as an Armenian thing, but I guess it is. I think of that as that's the normal thing. That's what you're supposed to do to your guests.
You're not giving yourself
because that's what you saw.
Enough. Yeah, you're not giving yourself enough Armenian credit.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. I've always battled my identity more than my sister did, for sure. I definitely, during my developmental years, it was easier for me to deny being Armenian because it was harder to hold on to it. It was easier for me to speak English than to speak Armenian. So I would fight it. And so my mom would fight me. And so I ended up going to Armenian school for 12 years, Saturdays, Armenian school for 12 years to know how to identify. And I fought my mom. And I didn't want to, be like the Armenians. And I didn't want to uphold the Armenian, what did you call it, Son? The national, like, your disgrace, and almost, how do we say almost?
Almost the national, what is it? Shame.
The shame.
Like shame is a big like component of like shaming people into acting appropriately, shaming people into conforming to society and stuff. I rejected that a lot too when I was younger.
We did reject that. However, I didn't want to accidentally shame the country because I felt that sense of responsibility
to bring shame to the country.
So I would say that's not my Armenian side, because I know that my Armenian side would perhaps bring shame. So I wanted to not bring shame to the culture. So I was denying my Armenian identity. So
I think everybody goes through that thing. I mean, I went through the same thing here. Growing up, you have to try to reconcile what are you, because you are too American for the Armenians, you are too Armenian for the Americans, you are an immigrant, but you're not immigrant enough because you've been here for a long time, but you're still an immigrant. So that whole thing of like, and I think a lot of Armenians go through that, where you kind of like reject the Armenianness and you embrace being an American. But at the same time, like I went through that at like senior year of high school and stuff. But then I didn't get anything I wanted or needed from the non-Armenians. I didn't get that community feeling. I didn't get that feeling of like I'm belonging to a group, like a social group or anything like that. So for me, being rejected was kind of like I don't know if it was rejection or if it was just not fitting in and not finding a voice. So I kind of gravitated back towards Armenianness, and I think that's where Inga was kind of. I think because see, I thought you would come back a lot sooner than you did. Yeah. I thought you would come back at the same age that I came back at like 20-ish.
No.
Your rejection was a lot longer than mine. Yeah. So and a lot of Armenians go through this too. Like if you're born, especially if you were born here and you have like this dual identity, and who do you go for and what do you do?
Yeah. I'll tell you when I came back. When I started doing Armenian theater, and I was like, oh, now that's my purpose. I have to be an Armenian entertainer because there's a lack of Armenian artists. And I remember reason why I rejected Armenianness is because it wanted me to reject being an actress. It was not an acceptable avenue to pursue. The arts were not acceptable. It was not lucrative. It is not financially, and so therefore we don't know anybody in the arts. And the arts community is incredibly small in the Armenian community itself. Everybody knows everybody. Like me and Inga know a lot of the famous people because we work with them because the community is like, super tiny. So we didn't know that there was room for us in that community. So then you kind of reject it because that's what you want to do. And if you wanted to go into the arts, you have to reject Armenianness so that you don't bring shame to your people. You don't bring, you know what I mean? It is shameful. And Armenians are very, very socially conservative. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's being socially conservative, it is not acceptable to be an actress. An actress kisses people. An actress does scenes that are, you know what I mean, like slightly open. And by slightly open, I mean like sleeveless.
Yeah. Inga, can you talk about your immigrant series?
Yeah, that was interesting. So Immigrants was the first drama shot in America that was completely Armenian, run by an Armenian channel. It was being
about the Armenian-American experience.
About the Armenian immigrant experience, yes. So it was the first of its kind. It was being shot here. Full Armenian cast. Some Armenian famous people, actors were coming from Armenia to do this because it was such a revolutionary time for Armenians and entertainment industry. We had the channels.
This was 10 years ago.
This was 10 years ago, yeah. Prior to that, the reason why I ended up on the show was because I was doing Armenian theater. I was doing Armenian theater. And quite frankly, at that time, there was absolutely nothing happening as far as cultural. There was like organizations were doing, little community, AGBU was doing their own community theater and it had a following a little bit, but nothing like on a grand scale that was producing theatrical productions one year after another. And so Vahik and I, when we started, it was the beginning of a very interesting journey because the entire culture was feeling depraved of Armenian arts. And so it did very well.
Can I say something about that, please?
Yeah, sure.
Armenians love the theater. So Armenian has a big love of theater. They think theater is like, like true, like Shakespearean level of like love and obsession with theater. It's pretty much the same relationship that the English have with theater, how they revere it, how it's, like that's where true actors go to. So we have that, but because of the economic situation and the downturn and everything else, a lot of Armenian artists had to abandon their culture, that side of them, just to go and be able to survive and make a few dollars. So a lot of the theater and that thing of like, getting dressed up. I remember when we were younger, my mom always made us go to the theater, went to concerts, went to shows, went to plays. That was another aspect of our culture. So there was this vacuum of the need for it and the want for it. And Vahik filled that need.
The problem with Vahik, I have to mention something else. Vahik, as an Armenian coming from Iran, Tehran, which is a Muslim country, doesn't allow them to sing, doesn't allow them to dance, doesn't allow them to drink. So he cannot go back to his motherland where he was born to put his dad, to say goodbye to his dad during his funeral, because in America, he has a show where he dances and he sings and there's drinking. So he's not allowed. He's exiled because of that reason. And so that's another element, that he's an Armenian trying to preserve Armenian culture in a Muslim country that bars them from expressing and being an actor and dancing out in public and singing in public. So his situation was worse because he had to give up ever seeing his dad and mom again. And it was really hard when his father passed away. Another actor who was doing theater here. Oh my God, this is so hard. He went back to his homeland and they took out his eye because he was an actor here. You know who I'm talking about, right, sis? And what do you know about it? That comedian, he was like that. They took out his eye because he went back to Tehran. He had a thick beard. He had a thick.
Oh, the one that, yeah.
So to even do Armenian theater meant that you had to. For
Vahik is a different thing too. Yeah, because Vahik is so there's, because again of the diaspora and how spread out we are, the diasporic enclaves. One of them is Persian Armenians, and we call them Persian Armenians because Armenians have been living there since the time of Persia. So that community has survived, thousands of years, honestly. So Vahik is Persian Armenian. They have their own dialects. Some of the lexicon is different from us. We are Hayastansi Armenians, which is people from Hayastan. There's also Eastern and Western dialects and Western diaspora, which is all the Armenians that were from the Western Armenia, historical Armenia, and their dialects are different than our dialect as well.
So that's where the depravity of the culture, feeling the need to see theater. And so Vahik comes along and I come along with him and his troupe, and we galvanize an entire, I want to say
5-6 years, but those 5-6 years, it was, I cannot describe it to you the way for it to be accurate without sounding grandiose.
Yeah.
So Vahik would, like considered cultural, you know what I mean, community theater and stuff. It's nothing on a huge grand scale. But whatever he was doing, if he was doing this, let's say in New York, he would be considered an off-Broadway phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because the way that he was able to get people to come in every single day, he would have shows, let's say it was a month-long show and there was a show every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The show would start at 7:30. People would line up at 4:30 outside the auditorium
in the rain
to get in the rain. I saw that in the rain, and I was like, these people are crazy. People would line up, and they would come not once, but twice, but 3 times because they were laughing so much. Yeah. They had missed half of the jokes, so they would come in to hear the rest of the jokes, because they had been laughing so hard and missed on the first round. Like the way he was able to write and stuff, and some of the things that he was able to say was incredibly poignant and important to our culture. But, you know, like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. He was able to do that for Armenian society, for the diasporic society here.
Mm-hmm.
He had a little bit of notoriety in the Persian Armenian community because of the Persian plays that he did. Before he started doing Armenian plays, he was doing plays in the Persian language, in
He was
Farsi.
doing not play. Well, yeah, he did plays too. He was doing a variety show, Persian variety show.
Yeah, variety show. Videotaped variety show.
It was videotaped. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a trend too within the Armenian arts community, where like the comedians and stuff, theater wasn't up to par. There wasn't, you know, people didn't have money, but they would make a video, and that video would make the rounds, and it would, you know, have been displayed and have like a screening of the video, and then afterwards people would make copies of it and just pass it around and stuff. And Vahik made those kinds of videos as well. He still has a few of them.
Yeah, it's all online now. So
Yeah.
That's how I ended up as a cast member to one of the very first.
You're forgetting something.
Am I?
You're forgetting something.
Oh, okay. So my sister got a position because, my sister, I don't want to tell the whole story, but let's just say my sister ended up being, I let her know that they were looking for an AD. And I won't mention how I found out that they were looking for an AD, because I was not I was not cast in the beginning. The role that I played, I was recasted, or the role was recasted, and I'm gonna have to tell you that when we're not on a podcast.
You can't have it online.
Yeah, it's not gonna.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's just say, okay. So I was watching a lot of the Armenian shows and on there, and at the same time I was studying film, and I was, you know, doing my master's program and stuff. And I would get very upset because they were making elementary mistakes in their filming. I was like, don't they have an adequate person? Like that's, you know, like somebody that pays attention to continuity, somebody that pays attention to where the sun is coming from, so that you don't have a sun on one character that's coming from one side, and then when you flip the camera over, the sun is on the other side of the character. You know, certain fundamental things in filmmaking. And I said, instead of Film 101, and I said, you know what, instead of complaining about it, I need to put my money where my mouth is and start working on them. And as soon as I made that decision and I said it out loud and to myself, I think like Inga forwarded me, like maybe a few days afterwards, Inga forwarded me this link that says, hey, they're looking for AD, for somebody that's going to be producing type of person that can, you know what I mean, like do whatever I was training to do.
You just
said, okay, fine, let me go and you know what I mean,
way,
put my money where my mouth is.
Sona was like, why would I work in the Armenian community? It's just I wouldn't. She didn't feel like she wanted to go. I remember I was like, we should start in the Armenian community. It's easier, and then we'll jump into the American market. She was like, no, you're wasting your time. You just need to go to the American market. So she ended up doing that, and I ended up doing the opposite, because I was like, it's going to be easier for me because I've been doing theater since I was 9 and I hadn't made it in the American market. And I was like, okay, I guess
there was no Armenian film market for me to go to, Inga.
Well, I meant like, but I remember having that conversation.
Okay, I have to say this.
This is true.
Okay, before I came onto set, they were not using a slate.
Yeah.
I had to demand a slate. Okay, so when you have an AD demanding a slate, It should tell you something about like the situation of the.
And that's why she said, like, why would I waste my time trying to start an industry when there's already an industry that I can just start working for and put Armenian names out there. That's what, when we were kids, it was like, we're going to be the first Armenians to ever get Oscars. Like, I don't know how we're going to do it. I just remember she was like, there's no Armenians with an Oscar. And I was like, this was before Cher, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to be like, wait a minute.
Yes, this was before Cher. And she would sit down and she would wait until after the movie was over. And I was like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm looking for a YAN last name in the credits, you know? And there isn't any. You know what that means? I was like, yeah, they don't take any Armenians. She's like, no, that means that we can be the first ones. That means there isn't any Armenians, that we're going to be the first Armenians. And we thought we were going to be the first Armenians to ever be in America. I thought I was the first Armenian ever in America.
In the film industry. You're the first Armenian ever in the film industry ever. Yeah.
So I just remember that.
And then it goes back to when we first came, because there was no Armenians around us. So it came back to that. We didn't see a representation of Armenians, you know what I mean, in the media. So it's like, okay, then we have to be that representation that we don't see in the media. So I started on working on that, and I said, I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'll use my education to, you know, help shape the Armenian film market and the Armenian television market.
And that's how we both ended up on the project together. I was one of the
I worked
leads,
on,
and she was the AD, and I stayed on for a year, and then you stayed on for 2 years, sis, and then we ended up.
I did 75 episodes of it.
Wow.
It was 100 and something episodes, and I did 75 of those 100 and something episodes.
And then I went off onto the spinoff.
I didn't do the spinoff. I was too tired and traumatized from them to continue working with them. So I was not being appreciated for the amount of work I was doing, because I was literally doing the work of like 4 or 5 people, where I was set dressing, coordinating wardrobe, producing, scheduling, ADing, you know what I mean, running interference, permits, all of that stuff was just, you know, it was me, a script supervisor, 2 cameramen, and a boom operator.
Wow.
So can you imagine, like, the amount of work and stuff that was on my shoulders? So it got to the point where I was just like, the negativity from then, I was just like, okay, if you guys think you can hire somebody else to do my job, by all means, please go ahead.
Yeah. So. And that's why they don't have any productions now. Unfortunately. But we're not, listen, something is better than nothing. And we all had, like, everyone that was involved in this project were in the same idea. Okay, you guys, this is our opportunity. We're going to do it. Unfortunately, the people who are the funders,
the financiers
weren't able to support those grandiose expectations
and demands.
So they see Hollywood, they see that we're in Hollywood, and they're expecting Hollywood production, but they don't want to give Hollywood prices. Right. So of course there's going to be quality issues.
I had to explain that diagram so many times that, you know what I mean, something can be cheap, fast, and good. It is not going to be all 3. So pick the 2 that is the most important for you. If you want it fast and cheap, it's not going to be good. You know, so if you want it good and fast, it ain't going to be cheap. So I had to explain that to grown men so many times.
Yeah.
That, you know, but it for what it was a big change, and it was kind of like put the stamp that there is an artistic and community and a film community here in Los Angeles of Armenians in the diaspora, and that we have something to say. So from that aspect, it was good, and it, you know, it didn't hurt that Inga still gets recognized from it. There was a time that I couldn't go anywhere in Glendale and stuff because I looked like Inga, so people thought I was Inga. And when Inga would get approached, she would say, no, that's my sister.
Yeah, I would lie. Be like, oh no, that's not me. That's my sister. Yeah, I'll say hi to her, you know? Because then you know what happens is they want to discuss the show with you and ask you, why is it that you ended up writing that note? Didn't you know that this person wasn't going to like with that note that you would have said? And I was like, you realize you're talking to a character, right? That is about a character. It's not real life. It's not me. And they would want to come and try to understand the character's choices by discussing what I could have done differently. They thought it was real people. what I could have done differently, you know? And they were like, but why? I don't understand. Why did you end up going? And like, so a lot of people that didn't want to talk to me, they wanted to discuss the script and ask why I did what my character, why they did what they were so invested. Every single Armenian was watching. Every single person I knew was immigrants. Everybody would turn on immigrants. It was like this, you know, this new thing that everybody wanted to be. Yeah, it was a phenomenon. Everybody wanted to be a part of, and I just.
And it was one of the first two serials, episodics, that were being screened, and it was and the first and only one that was being shot in the United States. Since then, a lot of other ones have been shot here. Like one of the ways that I met some of my friends that are in Armenia that are fellow filmmakers was through immigrants and through future projects, you know, working with them. Through immigrants, I met, and I'm still friends with a lot of the filmmakers there, like the crew, some of the directors that were brought in, and some of them were working on the old Soviet style of perception of filmmaking, and they needed somebody that had grown up in the United States, had gone in and worked in the U.S. market, and knew and understood the rules and regulations of the U.S. market of like, well, you need a release if you're going to broadcast somebody's face. You need a release for XYZ. You need a location for a release for XYZ. You need somebody to go and talk to police and you know what I mean, like for permits and blah, blah, blah. That was me. That was, you know what I mean, that was my purpose. So they needed somebody to control these 40-something, 50-year-old men. I was in my 20s when this was happening, and it talk about misogyny, talk about like cultural norms and gender roles and going against those gender roles. Like me and Vahik had a blowout on one of the times, like full on shouting matches. You know what I mean? Like, like we had to be separated.
Well, and then I'll tell you what ended up happening was, as a result, 10 years later, I was approached by an American filmmaker who wanted to make an Armenian film. And we were the first Armenian film in the history of the LA film market or the film festival to have an Armenian film. Unfortunately, I would have loved for that to happen through an Armenian director. I still would like to have
not enough money.
Of course, and that's why I understand. I feel like just like you should, if your character requires an Indian, I would much rather an Indian play it instead of some, let's say, a different culture playing that. I believe in representation, so I feel like I would much rather have an Armenian director being the first to put an Armenian film in the LA film market. But I'll take what I can get. It's a start. And I feel like same thing with Armenia, other cultures, you know, if it requires, if it's an Asian character, then don't have a white person playing an Asian. Have an Asian, character.
Scarlett Johansson is not Asian.
Exactly. And I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to nitpick her, but yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Same thing with directors. I feel the same thing. Like,
yeah, because it's representing the Armenian voice, that your director is not Armenian. It's not going to translate as Armenian.
But one thing I've noticed, like especially like some of the Armenian films that I've been watching that's been coming out recently and stuff, a lot of non-Armenian directors give a new perspective to Armenian voices. So if you have the writer that is Armenian, if you have the characters that are Armenian and stuff, I think there's one film that I really fell in love with, and the director was a Russian girl. It was called If Only Everyone, Yete Bolore, with Mikhail Bogosyan. And I don't think if that was to be shot by an Armenian, would have given it the same breadth and same appreciation to the culture as it would have been that it's been shot by a non-Armenian. So certain aspects of it, I do agree that it needs to be an Armenian voice, but I think the Armenian representation does not need to be so completely and wholly the same.
At least the very first film, I would have preferred for it to be that, but I'm not saying that
granted,
it's a first step. Yes,
granted.
It's a first step. Absolutely, you know,
there's certain metrics that I understand where you're coming from, but from a certain standpoint of it, I don't think that the director is as important as is the producers, as is the writer. So if you have one Armenian voice in there, I think that's
well, at that time,
that's what is required.
The director was the producer and was the, you know, unfortunately,
yes. And fortunately, that director / producer / writer listened to other Armenian producers.
Yes, he did. Yes, this is true.
And that gave it an authentic flavor and an authentic voice to it. Yeah. So even if you don't have an Armenian writer or director, you can have the Armenian voice still be present by giving a space to producers that are Armenian, to other writers, or, you know what I mean, just being open and listening to suggestion that is a representation of the culture. Now, one thing that I have no room for is for cultural appropriation, which Lady Gaga did. So that is, you know what I mean, it goes outside of celebrating the culture, and it starts to be more exploitive of it without actually, you know what I mean, giving a voice to anybody in the culture itself.
Because I don't think anybody knew that was, unless you were Armenian, that was Armenian motif that was being used. If you're not Armenian, would you recognize it?
So the music video that we're talking about is the 911 music video with Lady Gaga. So Lady Gaga, before the war happened, I think like maybe 2 weeks before, released the music video 911. And and I did a little bit of research into it. So the director is an Indian director, but he loves Sergei Paranjanov, which is an Armenian filmmaker. And Sergei Paranjanov's most famous film is The Color of Pomegranate, which is very much like Fellini, which is like motifs and little visions and you know what I mean, like vignettes, tongue-tied, vignettes of it and stuff. So it's like little images of it. So he loved The Color of Pomegranate. So he proposed the film, The Color of Pomegranate, and the motif of The Color of Pomegranate as an underlying theme of the music video. And in order to tie it in, what they did is at the very end, it says Armenian Film Festival, and it has the poster of The Color of Pomegranate and a couple of other internationally famous Armenian films. But the entire movie itself has taken motifs and visual aspects from the film The Color of Pomegranate. So it is our culture that has been represented in The Color of Pomegranate has been repurposed for Lady Gaga's music video. So everybody was ecstatic. They appreciated her. They even had an Armenian caution tape. That police tape was written in Armenian caution as opposed to in English. So they had like Armenian flavors and stuff in there. The artistic director of it, the creative director, is an Armenian. So they had an Armenian flair and voice in there. But after the music video came out and the war broke out, not one peep came out of Lady Gaga. Not from her representation, not from her management, not from her music label, nobody said anything. So she exploited our culture. She exploited our culture for her fame and for her music video. But when it came down to amplifying a voice of saying, hey, these people who 2-3 weeks ago I released a music video are being genocided. And the thing is, The Color of Pomegranate is a movie about the Armenian genocide.
That's the
wow. Oh,
so it's like you take in a movie, and it's like, and the genocide is physically happening right now, and you're not saying one peep to be like, I support the Armenian people. She could have had one thing on Instagram and it would have been blown up in the Armenian community, it would have gone viral in the Armenian community. Her music video went viral and we were very proud and we were happy she was using that and she was doing that. But No, nothing. And that is where I have no room for. I don't have any room for that kind of cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
I will share my culture. I will have people, I love dressing non-Armenians up in Armenian ethnic clothing for you guys to see what it feels like. I put my husband in Armenian clothing. You know, I mean, like we took pictures when we went to Armenia of like traditional Armenian wear, which is called taraz.
She's seen mine in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Inga's got a picture too. We were all in that. We did the traditional wares and stuff. That I will share. That is a celebration of my culture. But when you take my culture and an aspect of it, and then you don't acknowledge when a literal genocide is happening again.
Yeah.
So that I don't have room for that.
So you know, the same thing happened with we talked about Cardi B, but Elton John was another person who got targeted by the bots to bring down his support. So he texted his support, and then through pressure,
he had to retract it.
He had to retract it. So that's how far this arm reaches of propaganda and disinformation and misinformation. If you watch the CNN interview with Aliyev and the type of rhetoric that Aliyev, is it BBC? Was
BBC.
Yeah, BBC. Okay. And the entire rhetoric verbatim is Trumpism coming out, spewing out, where BBC fake news. He's like you have the ceasefire. You have broken the ceasefire, and he says no. It's what you heard. And she says no, but personnel was on the ground, and after the ceasefire,
our journalists were there.
Our journalists were there, and they saw it, and we have evidence. And he literally says, yeah, that's fake news. So it is, and I say this again, they're taking a page out of American politics, current politics. Anything that Trump has done to undermine American democracy is the weapon of choice that they are using to completely discredit Armenians trying to defend themselves.
Because they have seen that it's been effective.
It is. Yeah. It is very effective. Yeah. It is very effective.
Yeah. The audacity of Aliyev saying that we are causing genocide to his people when they're the aggressors, it's gaslighting, or it's saying, "Hey, I'm being bullied," and then the bully saying, "Oh, I'm the bully here because I was provoked." So I'm only, it's not only are we being blamed for what we're not doing, but the atrocities that are being committed to us, we're being framed for genocide for this? Like, are they really using that word, that we're creating genocide on their people? That's because of the cojones that Trump has allowed Aliyev to borrow his balls so he can use his own.
Yeah.
Okay, so
they're flipping the
here's
narrative.
The thing with Trump, okay? There's a video circulating around where Trump, and I think Trump got into a bit of so many moons ago, I can't even, it was several scandals ago with Trump. So Trump's connections to Erdogan and Trump's connections to Aliyev. So Trump tried to
Aliyev
have a Trump Tower in Baku.
Aliyev is the prime minister. Well, he's been president for 15 years.
No, he's a dictator because he's been passed down from his father. Haydar Aliyev was the president, which was part of that. He was a KGB asset and member. Afterwards, he was the president of Azerbaijan, and then his son, Bana Aliyev, right now is his son. Haydar Aliyev was his dad, so it's been passed down. And his wife is the vice president.
The wife is the vice president. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The wife is the vice president, and she's from the opposition party. So how do you have a wife from the opposition party be the vice president? And she was assigned as vice president. She was not elected. There was no election thing. So it is a dictatorship. It is a full-on controlling dictatorship. So part of their caviar PR was trying to get international companies, organizations to come and open hotels, blah, 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 blah. One of the things was the Baku Hotel, the Trump Tower in Baku. They were building it and building it and building it, and they built it. And there's videos of Ivanka Trump talking about how, look, Baku is the capital of Azerbaijan.
Okay.
and it's on the sea.
It's on the east border. Eastern border of the country.
Eastern border, and it has a lot of oil fields, and it's an oil country. It's where they're getting a lot of their money from. So what was I saying? That Baku is they were doing that, and Ivanka over there is like, look at the beautiful Baku, look at my view, like look at how beautiful it is and everything else. So Ivanka was touting at it because they were trying to get Trump Tower off the ground, and it was being built, and it was construction, and then all of a sudden construction stopped. So who knows what happened to that. So in the process of the caviar PR, he had connections with Trump. Trump made a video for his son-in-law, which was a pop star, a Azeri pop star. So there's videos of Trump wishing Aliyev's son-in-law, happy birthday, you couldn't be the best dude, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so if you have Trump making videos for your son-in-law, how good are your relationships? When you're cutting funding from the rival nation of $100 million in military aid to $15 million and upping the military aid to $120 million, what is the relationship? There is a Trump Tower in Turkey, and he wants to make a Trump Tower in Ankara. There's a Trump Tower in Istanbul. So what is the relationship there? If there's compromise because of Khashoggi, the journalist Khashoggi that was murdered at the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. Is there video or is there any corroborating phone calls that ask for permission to go ahead with this from the Trump administration that can be used as compromise? Is there? What is the relationship with Erdogan and Trump? When Trump was newly elected and Erdogan came in to say hello and congratulate him on his presidency, what happened when Armenian and Kurdish American citizens were protesting a quarter mile away at a park away from the Turkish embassy, and Aliyev on his car ride over spots them in the distance and then instructs his own bodyguards, his personal bodyguards, the personal bodyguards of a head of state of another country, to beat up those protesters, and they did. And then the Capitol State Police comes in and arrests who? The bodyguards? No, they arrest the protesters who are American citizens. And Trump doesn't make a freaking peep about that.
Wow.
And that's the beginning days of his presidency. When Michael Flynn is an unregistered Turkish lobbyist lobbying for the nation, lobbying for Turkish interests, who you assign as your head of national security.
Wow.
What is your relationship? When Michael Flynn is plotting to kidnap and relocate and hand over a Turkish dissident who is a professor in Michigan, Gülen, what is the relationship? What is the hope of America doing anything?
For Armenia.
So, yeah. We are an inconvenience. We are an inconvenience. That's what it is. Armenians have nothing to offer other than our hospitality, our khorovats, and our khash. That's all that we have to offer right now, and great economic advancements in our diasporic centers. Yeah. Anywhere the Armenians gone in as a diaspora, we have helped that nation go up. The green coloring on the dollar bill, the green ink that is used on the American US dollar bill that is printed and minted, that is invented by an Armenian. The fact that you watch television instead of black and white is because of an Armenian inventor. The fact that you can go and get an MRI is because an Armenian invented the MRI. We have contributed to society on such grand scales, but no human society on such on global scales, and we're not being acknowledged, and we're in the threat of being annihilated, and nobody makes a peep because nobody cares.
Well, I'm gonna try to make as much peeps as I can,
and I appreciate you amplifying. You doing this is it's so much more than a lot of.
Can I tell you what it is? You doing this, honey, makes me feel like I'm doing something. I've felt so helpless throughout this whole process. I don't have the money. I don't have
I don't have the connections. The fact that you sent me a letter from Diane Feinstein.
That dinosaur. It means a lot to us. Like, seriously, the fact that you took time out of your day.
I've done something. If I've just told one person who didn't know, especially in the beginning, I was like, Sona, I feel like a traitor. I feel like I have guilt.
Yeah, we're comfortably in the diaspora.
I feel I have guilt. I feel remorse and shame and just you being interested and helplessness. That's the part that's the hardest. And the fact that I can have a friend, not only that I bring to the Armenian culture because you worked on it, and the fact that you,
Whitney, if you stayed in Glendale, there's a high chance you would have married an Armenian man. Just FYI on that. And I'm serious on that. I have a friend, his name is Jason. We've been friends. I met him in New Orleans, and he's been friends with me, and he was in our class with me and Jeff and stuff. I introduced him to Armenians, and it was like, okay, he's most likely going to marry an Armenian. He's most likely going to marry somebody from my side of the world and stuff. And he's an honorary Armenian like that.
He tried. We did.
He dated for a while. Armenians. Actually, he ended up with an Iraqi girl. And there's Iraqi Armenians. So if we dig enough, maybe there's an Iraqi. She's got some Iraqi Armenian in her. Because of our diaspora and stuff. So we're recruiting you.
All right.
And most likely, if you want, we will probably find you an Armenian husband.
All right. I'm an honorary Armenian. I'll take it.
All we need to do is take you to Armenia, and you'll see.
All we gotta do is we gotta say, oh no, see, this is Tenny. See, she's in Tenny. She's all good.
she's an Armenian.
Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap up because we've been talking for about 3.5 hours.
Yes, we have.
Oh gosh.
But
okay.
all of it is very important. And I'm glad that we were able to discuss all of that at length. And I think.
And thank you so much for giving us a voice and giving us a platform to really speak about it. And that's the big thing for me too, is just like, how do I get all this information that I have out there into the world? And it's like, I'm not famous. I'm not this. I'm famous adjacent at most.
Yeah. Well, this is a baby podcast, so it will grow. So hopefully it will reach the people that need to hear it. Actually, that's my hope, is that the people that need.
If one person just goes in and starts doing some research about it, just educate yourself of what is going on. Educate yourself on history. Educate yourself, because all of this is like this geopolitics affects so much more than you actually imagine and can fathom. Like it affects policies, it affects where your tax dollars are going, it affects the future of your country. If a war breaks out, and there is a high possibility of war breaking out again, this can be the freaking the catalyst that starts the First World War, or the catalyst that started the Second World War. This whole thing, this skirmishes, this quote unquote area is a powder keg. It can blow up, and people need to prepare themselves that war is coming. It is inevitable.
I'm just curious as to if you have any recommendations for resources where we can stay informed, particular news sources, I don't know, that we can research.
There's certain news sources, I can't point to the traditional news sources anymore because the traditional news sources for me have been compromised, but I would seek out Armenian news sources. I would seek out things like Azatutyun, which is freedom in Armenian, Azatutyun TV, or Azatutyun Radio, or Azatutyun.com. I would seek out civilnet.com. They have live broadcasts, they have political analysis, they have information in English languages. There's a really good documentarian. He's on YouTube. He's putting out breakdowns in English about what's going on. His handle is Vagabondings. He's a German dude who's got an Armenian girlfriend, and he's been documenting. There's a war correspondent, Emil, oh my God, I forgot, Ellison or Ellison. He's actually been in Armenia on the ground. He's been like Tom Worrell for us, which was a journalist and documentarian in the first Armenian genocide. He's been over there and he's been showing boots on the ground. I would start following some of the war correspondent journalists. They're the ones that are independent, that are not tied down to a traditional news company. Like right now, CNN Turkey is the one that is reporting, but CNN Turkey is reporting on the bias side of it.
Right.
There's lots of, like Armenia right now has opened all of its borders to journalists from around the world to comment and document of what's going on. Azerbaijan has not. There's been an information and journalistic embargo over there. In Azerbaijan, there was a French reporter that's pretty much said we are only allowed to show where we're brought to show and what we've allowed to film, and so on and so forth. So I would go in for Armenian and Armenian sources and Armenian adjacent sources of people who are on the ground themselves, that have been honestly reporting on what's been going on. Reddit has been an incredible source of news. Every day there is on the Reddit thread, on a mega thread, there is an article that is put out with all, like an aggregated article of all the news with English translations. A lot of the news is in Armenian or in Russian, but it's been translated into English and given like little blurby breakdowns of what's going on. And it's not just for the war, it's just like what is going on in the country of Armenia in general. So it's like COVID update, has corruption information of who's being arrested and all that other stuff. Right now, a lot of it is dominated with news information about the war and the after effects of like the ceasefires and the treaties and all that other stuff that's going on.
I'll put some of those links in the show notes so people can click on them, do their homework for them.
Yeah, I'll try to get you the names of there's actually like a little video that was posted by Vagabondings interviewing Emil, which is the other war correspondent. So they're interviewing each other of like what's going on and what's happening. Yeah, those are the news sources I would trust.
Awesome. Okay, I usually wrap up with this question. Okay, if you can both answer this individually, but if you had a billboard that expressed your inner voice to the world, what would it say?
It's wake up and pay attention. Honestly, it's wake up and pay attention of what's going on in the world around you. And it's because it's very easy to get wrapped up in everyday working and trying to survive. And you don't see how you trying to survive, you're contributing to part of that. You know what I mean? You're taxed all the machine. Yeah, the machine. Try to see where you fit in that machine. And even if you can't stop that machine, maybe you can augment it. Maybe you can change the trajectory of it. Maybe you can add something to it so that the outcome is not so predetermined. You know, I would say wake up and pay attention. Ignorance is bliss. It is very comfortable to be ignorant. It is very comfortable just to be in your life and not know what's going on and not be bothered. But if you're paying attention, you should be bothered. You know, if you're paying attention to what's going on in America, you should be bothered. If you're paying attention to what's going on in the world, you should be bothered. It's not comfortable. It's definitely not comfortable. And sometimes, you know, you get lost of like what me as a tiny person can do. But everybody has a voice, everybody has a space, everybody can do something just by retweeting of what's going on. Retweet news articles that are factual. You know what I mean? Like tweet at journalists that are writing stuff that is propaganda, and tweet at news desks, but everyday regular people, stop buying Turkish products. You know what I mean? We are
watch where dried apricots are coming. Most of them are Turkey, and I'm going to say indigenous Armenian land. Those are our apricots.
The Latin word for apricot is fructus armenius, which means fruits of Armenia. So look at Ferrero Rocher. You know what I mean? Like boycott Nutella, because they've got farms in Turkey that grow hazelnuts, and those hazelnuts are being grown with child labor. Hazelnuts are being grown in an exploitative environment, and it's not just that they're buying it; that they're sending scientists there to try to increase the yield. So of course they know that child labor is being used. Of course they know what's going on. Boycott Turkish products, boycott Turkish garments. If you're going to Zara, if you're going to H&M and you see something is made in Turkey, don't buy it. You know, you as a consumer, you speak with your dollars. So vote with your dollars. Who are you supporting? What country are you supporting with your dollars? We have to be much more conscious consumers. You know, the money that you spend, you're giving a voice to, and you're amplifying those voices, and you are agreeing with whatever that country and that politicians that are running that country agree with. You know, like that's, you know what I mean? You're agreeing with their policies. So vote with your dollars.
What about you, Inga? What's your voice say?
There's this quote, and I'll use the quote because I think history is repeating itself, and therefore there are ample amount of quotes that happily apply. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but when you're complacent that about an issue, especially a human rights issue, then you are contributing to the human rights violations.
Yeah.
If you are looking away, that is as bad as holding the gun.
Right.
To me. So I would like to bring the people who are comfortably complacent that they are part of the problem, that they are just as guilty of holding. I won't say the people who don't know. Yes, you have to get yourself. Yeah, but once you know and you're still like, hey, you know what? That's on the other side of the world. This doesn't really affect me. This is really uncomfortable to even think about. So I'm not, because it's gonna make me cry. Because how could it not?
Right.
So I would try to empower those people instead of shaming them for being indifferent. I would want to empower them. And I don't know what words I would use on a billboard to not shame them, but to encourage them to not be
Where
complacent.
are your tax dollars going?
Yeah.
Everything's connected. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't
what are your tax dollars supporting?
If you're not standing up for something, then you'll fall for anything. These are all just cliches, but because the reason why they apply is because we haven't gone past the same problem that we dealt with a century ago. And, you know, and that's what I said. This is really explicit, but I would say, you know what happens when you deny genocide? They come to finish the job. That's what I would put on a fucking billboard.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It says it all.
No, it's like what we're going to remember from this is not the people that stood, we of course remembering the people that stood by up next to us, is that all of our friends that didn't say anything. Right now it is like a burning thing in my, you know, my social media, that I have so many people in my social media, so many followers, so many this, so many that, and not like only a handful of people cared enough. And those were the people that were like super connected to Armenians, that had like friends and stuff. But the people that I've worked with that are not Armenians, the people that have known me, if you know me, you know I'm Armenian. And if you know I'm Armenian, you know what the situation is and the causes and everything else. So if you know a tiny little bit of me, you know that I am Armenian, and you've worked with me, and if you know that this is something that is going on, or if it is, like, it needs to like spark some interest. It needs to do something where
you know what the funny thing is?
I remember the silence of my friends.
But you know what, Son? I was there during the Green Revolution, you know, when Tehran was going through, what was it? The Arab Spring. I was super, super involved when Egypt went through their thing, when Tehran and Iran was going through their
yeah, the protests and everything else, like when the Arab Spring was happening and everything else. Everybody was, you know, it's a change. It's supposed to be a change, and you're going to be supportive and this and that of it. But again, when the time comes and my friends are silent, are they my friends, or are they just acquaintances?
Yeah. Well, there's another cliche of saying, like,
no, it's the saying is we remember Martin Luther, MLK. Yeah, MLK. You know, we don't remember, like, we remember the silence of our friends. Like, I remember that stands out so much to me, that it tells me that, do I need to invest in these relationships? Do I need to put in the time in these relationships? Do I need to give these people a voice? Why do I need to cast them if they don't give a flying, you know?
Yep.
When in the time of need, and you can't rely and you can't go on, like, what's the point? What is that relationship for then? You know, like, I'm going to be there as much as possible for you. And then when the time comes and I'm in need and you don't make a peep to even say what's going on, that speaks volumes to who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And how much you value me or don't value me.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
thank
you guys.
This is freaking phenomenal.
It was therapeutic for me. I needed to cry it out, and I won't stop. You know.
Thank you for sharing it.
I think I've cried more in the past 2 months than I've cried in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, and the whole aspect of it is just.
And then I feel bad because then that's what they want, and then, you know, like,
But you still have to mourn.
Yeah, and that's the catch-22, where you are not comfortable in any of those emotions, where you're like, I just remember feeling Sona just saying, like, telling me that, you know, feeling the survivor's guilt is valid, and I was so ashamed, and I didn't even have a name for it. I just had hard feelings, and I just didn't know what to call him, where to put him, what to do with him, who to talk to, how to make sense. You know, it was just, I felt like they had won, because I didn't have to be there for them to
have affected
me. Yeah. And so
the psychological warfare part of it is brutal.
Yeah, it is. And I'm still, you know, it's still very drop of a hat. I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. That's the part that's getting to me. That's the part that's getting to me, because I want to be stronger, so I don't want it to get to me, because that's what they want. That's what the enemy wants.
But being strong is not just being, you know what I mean, emotionally separated or anything like that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You know, being strong is
facing your
continuing
emotions.
and persevering. Yeah. In spite of those emotions, and using those emotions as motivation.
Fuel.
You know what I mean? Like, I can sit and cry, or I can use that as motivation for me to write a movie, to, you know what I mean, write a script, to make something.
Turn your pain into
tangible.
Something. Yeah.
Turn your pain
tangible.
into paint. Yeah. Turn your turn your broken heart into art.
Turn your poison into medicine. Yeah. Like, that's a very Buddhist thing to say, but
yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't been successful. I've let it
it's not an overnight thing. It's not an overnight thing. This is going to be a long process. This is going to be months, if not years. This is going to take us a while for us to, like, really digest and really, like, analyze and go through it. Right now, it's the trauma. It's the initial trauma. Right now, it's like we have a leg that has been cut off, and our focus is to cauterize the wound to stop the bleeding. That's what our focus is right now. Afterwards, we can talk about rehab and walking and using the stick and all that other stuff.
It seems like now is accepting that it is happening.
Yeah, I know.
And you're doing, you know.
I can't imagine what that's like to have something happen when it's been such a fear for so many years.
Yeah.
And then it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird. And when you look up the term existential threat and, like, the meaning of it, and it's like, it's right there, you know, it's not something theoretical that can happen. It's like immediate, and that's what it is. And dealing with that, it's so much dread that I can't describe. It's being physically ill, of reading news that makes you physically nauseous.
Yeah, that's the hard part too. It's not just the psychological,
the physical aspect,
physiological. Of it. Yeah, it is definitely, like, I'm gonna have to go and lie down for the next 2 hours to recover from all of this, so I can just go back to.
Well, when you think about, like, DNA and how it's, like, passed down,
epigenetics. Yeah.
So, like, you're already dealing with a lot of that.
Yes, there's generational,
and then you're processing new on top of it.
Yes.
And so
this is intergenerational trauma that is perpetuating, and now it's the new intergenerational trauma that we will have to digest and psychologically prepare for. But the one thing that is important right now is that we have access to mental health that our great-grandparents didn't.
Right.
We are the diaspora that our great-grandparents did not have. Can you imagine all of this happening and having nobody speak anything about it? Not even having your own diaspora to say anything about it. Not having your own diaspora go in and write the articles and go in and, you know what I mean, pound on doors and demand the boycotts and all that other stuff that the Armenian diaspora has been doing so far, and sending in the monetary help and the aid and the food aid and the, you know what I mean, the actual physical medical aid and everything else. Armenian diaspora is going back there. Our doctors are going there, our therapists are going there, our mental health specialists are going there. Anybody in the diaspora that has any resources to be able to help our people right now are in Armenia. I have friends that are asking me if they need to go and learn military training and art and how to shoot so that if anything else pops off, they can go back and defend. That is the situation right now. I was honestly, before the war started, I had a friend of mine asking me if I knew how to shoot and if I knew where they can go in and can get military training here for like 6 weeks. So if they needed to go to Armenia, they could go in and have the military training to be able to go in. Me and my girlfriend were joking that I shoot like a marksman type of thing. I enjoy it, sniper shooting. And I was like, well, I can go in and be a sniper if I need to go in. And every Armenian had that thought of like, what can I do to go physically and help, to be a tangible physical help? Because donating and, you know what I mean, like doing all of this did not feel tangible enough. I was like, well, I can go in and drive a car and be transport. I'm a good driver, you know, like I can totally do off-roading and all that other stuff. So you have Armenians thinking of what can we physically do?
Yeah.
And because it comes from that point of like helplessness, of like needing to do something and not having it be done for you. And it's like, okay, well, I will roll up my sleeves. And a lot of the mentality in the diaspora was like, if I need to go and fight, I will go and fight. You know, I will go and protect because there's nobody else coming to protect. And that has been awoken in the Armenian community. Like everybody who I talked to that is Armenian, even before, if they were apathetic, if they were like, I'm Armenian in name only, right now they have a purpose.
Yeah.
They've awoken up the Armenian diaspora to be much more active and to be much more, take a more active role in the country and to take a more active role in our culture and in our communities. There's been so many.
It'll also help amplify to people who have no idea about any of this.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen a surgence of Armenian student associations at the collegiate level that has like pretty much exploded. When I went in, the collegiate level of the Armenian student organizations were concentrated only in the Southern California and California campuses, and maybe in the Boston to New York campuses, but that was very select. Now it's all over. If there's an Armenian university, there's 3 Armenians, we're going to get together and support an Armenian student association. And that's true for Armenians around the world. If there's 3 Armenians together, they will get together. They will, number one, the first thing they're going to do is build a church. The second thing that they're going to do is build a school next to it to teach the language. And the third thing they're going to do is create a community center so that the kids can have somewhere to go after school that is connected to the church.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying about 2 Armenians meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that. I think there's like an island in Greece where it's like the population is 100 people and there's like 2 Armenians there, and the 2 Armenians got together and they built a church on the tiny island so that they have their own little Armenian church. And for us, church is not just a religious center, it is a cultural center. It's like if you needed to find an Armenian, you will go to the church. I know there's an Armenian community in Calcutta. I know there's an Armenian community in Brunei. All I need to do is go and find the Armenian church, and they will get me in touch with the rest of the Armenian community. And that's the role it plays in the community. It's a meeting center. The funny thing was like the Armenians in the diaspora, if they wanted to get married to somebody, you know what I mean, that they would go from one diasporic center to another diasporic center. And they're like, so how are you going to meet anybody that way? They're like, well, I'm just going to go to the church and see who's there, you know, and just take it from there and meet people from there. So that is part of the cultural part of the thing of it, of keeping the Armenianness is that as well.
My parents wanted us to marry Armenians. And
for a long time, I thought I was going to marry Armenian. I was adamant before I met Jeff. I was like, only Armenians and that's it.
Yeah, I was the opposite. I was rejecting it, and then I was like, no, I think I'm done. I had a hard time. You know, I I tried, and I just was like, there's always a missing link. And I was like, okay, it has to be an Armenian. So then I started to want to like just date Armenians for a while, which I did. And it wasn't, it had to be somebody obviously from here, American Armenian. But my sister made a very good point that she said that, you could be so Armenian that you recruit another non-Armenian into the Armenian culture, and that is just as Armenian. And I was like, okay, well, why stop there? I got friends. Here you go, Whitney, come on over.
I have to say, Inga, you've recruited more non-Armenians into the Armenian community than I have.
Yeah, that's true.
You've recruited like entire friend groups into the Armenian community.
This is true.
My thing is that my Armenianness is not defined by who I marry, but my Armenianness is defined by the children I raise and the culture I continue to be a part of. Mm-hmm. So I'm so Armenian, and I love my culture so much that I'm recruiting people in it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the first recruit is my husband.
Fabulous. All right, I think this is a good place to wrap up. As things move along, we can reconvene if we need to discuss further what's happening. But I think this is a good
That's another thing with Armenians. We continue to do conversation again and again. Yes. So like when we first get together, we'll start to say, okay, it's time to go. And everybody would stand up and put on their jackets, and then for another 25 minutes have a conversation standing up, and then they would walk to the door and say their goodbyes and the hugs, but then have another conversation for 20 minutes, and then somebody would say like, I need to walk you to the car, it's not a safe area, even though it's like in the suburbs somewhere, and then everybody would come to the car and have a conversation by the car for 20 minutes. We've just done that.
It's called the Armenian goodbye. We literally call it the Armenian goodbye.
Gotcha. So that's why Armenians are kind of notoriously late.
Yes. Yes.
It all makes sense now.
We don't want to say goodbye.
And it's so true. That has been the cause for me many times, where I'm just in a good conversation and
like one more thing, and one more thing, and one more thing.
You just forget. You're just like, oh wait.
All right, I'm gonna go. So let's debate about the politics for a second, about the equality. You know what I mean? And one more thing. Yeah. Anyways. So I think we've said goodbye like 4 times already. So I think we fulfilled the quota. I think we're me and Inga are in the car right now on our way back.
We're just trying to give you a very Armenian experience. Perfect. That's all. You know?
Totally. I appreciate it. All right. I'm going to stop recording right now.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. And stay tuned in to you.